Then you jump into our 5.0, and the low light sensor on that thing is ridiculous. We were out testing it with we were out setting trail cameras actually on one of Jeff's hunting properties, and there were some deer out in the field. They're about 50 or 60 yards away from us. And it was getting to the point where you're kind of seeing silhouettes, more than anything with your naked eye. We got home and we were just playing with the cameras, kind of seeing what they would do. We get home, we plug them into the computer, and we're watching, and the camera was actually picking up more light than our eyes were, which was pretty darn outstanding, especially for a point of view. Yeah. So with my 5.0, I don't think I'd question its ability to get you out past legal shooting time.
Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, episode number 262. Aaron Stonehocker, Tactacam Hunt Tech, Part 2. Support for the Big Buck Registry and the Deer Hunt Podcast comes from Recology. Everything you need in one bag. Now available at Rural King and Orslyn Farm and Home storefronts, or online at www.recology.org. Hunters Blend Coffee, defending hunting one cup at a time. Finally, there's a coffee that helps rather than hurts your freedom to hunt. Use the code BBR to receive 10% off your next Hunters Blend order. Polar Works Coolers and the Chill Zone, specializing in the most durable, reliable thermal cups and coolers. Keep your drinks hot or cold in any element. Covert Scouting Cameras, remote cameras for hunting, wildlife, and security. Morris's Sporting Goods, a full line of sporting goods without the sales tax. And Big Buck merch. You can get cool, high-quality Big Buck t-shirts, long-sleeve t-shirts, and hoodies. And show support for this podcast by visiting www.bigbuckregistry.com/MERCH. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
This is Jake Bennett from Boston Bowhunter, and you're listening to the best Big Buck podcast, the Big Buck Registry.
Hey, this is John Livingston from Deer Lab, and you're about to listen to one of my favorite all-time podcasts, the Big Buck Registry.
Hey, this is Zach Sandow at Onyx Hunt, and you're listening to one of my personal favorite podcasts, the Big Buck Registry.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen and fellow predators. My name is Jay, and thank you for tuning in to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. For Dusty Phillips and Jim Keller and the entire staff here at the Big Buck Registry, welcome to this week's show. There are a couple things I'd like you to do for us if you could. If you would, please check us out on iTunes, subscribe, and leave us a review. With your help, we're going to try and push this show up the iTunes charts. I know we have a lot of listeners out there, and I need you to take some action. I need you to leave a review and subscribe to the show. If you do subscribe, that'll give you access and notification each and every week that a new show is released. You can also access this show in its entirety on YouTube, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, and as an Amazon Alexa skill. Go to Alexa and say, "Alexa, enable Big Buck Registry." It's all right there for you to access on demand at your fingertips. Regarding the harness program, we have an ample supply of harnesses to give away from our volunteer donors. If you're in need of a full-body harness, please send an email to jay@bigbuckregistry.com. On the last episode of Deer Hunt, we began our exploration of hunting technology with the Drury's new app called DeerCast. We continue our series on hunting technology in this episode with the likes of Tactacam, a company who built what is perhaps the best deer hunting action camera on the market. We've all been involved in hunts where we wished we had a camera to film it all but didn't. And there's that occasion when we did have a camera, but the awkwardness of using the camera and taking the shot at the same time made for terrible footage. There have been other action cameras on the market, but somehow this small company out of Minnesota has gotten top marks with hunters, probably because they thought through what the hunter needs most. A camera that can seemingly just be part of the equipment, conveniently hidden near the end of a barrel or within the stabilizer of a bow, and without duct tape, and can be activated with the push of a button. Tactacam continues to reach new ground as it constantly attempts to increase the quality of the video with the likes of Tactacam 5.0, but has never compromised for those hunters on a budget, for example, with the Tactacam Solo. Stay with us as we explore all aspects of Tactacam on the show with the likes of Aaron Stonehocker. And stay tuned for next week when we explore some more technology with John Livingston from Deer Lab. We'll get to our entire interview with Aaron Stonehocker from Tactacam in just one moment, but before we do, let's hear from our friends at Recology, Polar Works Coolers, and Jim Keller with the Deer News.
I still can't believe that's all you're taking.
I got everything I need all in one bag.
Recology Deer Supplement and Attractant, developed through years of intense scientific research, comes a product that puts it all in one bag. Superior attractant, scientifically formulated vitamins and minerals, and all at a much better price. To get yours today, please check out Recology.org for a list of dealers. Recology, how can you afford not to use it? Everything deer need, all in one bag.
I always wanted one of those high-end coolers because of the quality that I had heard of, but I couldn't justify the price. Then I found Polar Works. Finally, I found a company that understands quality and affordability. The Polar Works lineup is extensive and is filled with Polar cups, Polar tubs, and Polar soft coolers. So check out polarworks.com when you're considering your next high-quality cooler without breaking the bank. That's www.polarwerkz.com.
For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News. Our first story this week. After decades of debate, tracking dogs can now be used in Pennsylvania to find wounded deer, bear, and elk. This story is from the LancasterOnline.com website and was written by Ad Crable. For the first time in more than a century, deer hunters in Pennsylvania this fall are able to recover their shot deer by using a tracking dog. The General Assembly approved a dog tracking legislation for big game species this spring, and archery hunters who are now hunting deer are the first who can use dogs. Game that can now be tracked by dogs are deer, bear, and elk. The legislation, which has gone through a number of modifications and regulation changes during decades of debate, requires that any dog used to track wounded or lost game be on a leash and can't go onto private property without permission. The law also requires that the big game being tracked have been shot by a hunter. The hunter who has shot the game may carry a firearm to dispatch the animal if found, but not at night, on Sundays, or after legal regular hunting hours. Nor can the game be shot the day after a hunting season closes for that species. It's something that hunters have pushed for 2 decades as a humane, common-sense step to prevent game from being wasted. At least 23 other states have approved dog tracking of game in the last 30 years. In 8 southern states, it was never illegal. However, in Pennsylvania, the idea encountered some pushback. The use of dogs to hunt game was outlawed in the early 1900s during the days of widespread hunting for commercial purposes. Initially, the Game Commission refused to back the use of dogs to track wounded game because the agency didn't want to take on licensing and regulations. But licensing requirements were dropped. Essentially, anyone can be a tracker if he or she has a dog and hunting license for the species being pursued. Trackers can charge for their services. It's between the hunter and tracker to make arrangements. However, since commercial activity is not allowed on game lands, any tracking done on game lands must be free. Hunters may find a list of trackers by using an interactive map provided by the United Blood Trackers Group. Bovine tuberculosis in Michigan deer, not a concern in Missouri or Kansas, experts say. This story is from the Fox4KC.com website. Michigan officials are warning hunters about bovine tuberculosis found in deer, but Missouri and Kansas officials want local hunters to know it's not something they need to worry about. Bovine tuberculosis was recently confirmed in a large cattle herd in Alcona County, Michigan, making it the 73rd cattle herd in the state to be identified with the bacterial disease since 1998. Bovine TB attacks the respiratory system of animals, usually cattle and deer, creating bubbles and white spots near the rib cage. The disease is a problem in Michigan and Minnesota due to the state's wetter climates, but both Kansas Department of Wildlife and Tourism and the Missouri Department of Conservation said it's not a problem there. There haven't been any cases of bovine tuberculosis in recent Kansas or Missouri history, and Missouri officials even said there has never been a case in deer. So while Michigan hunters should be on the lookout when hunting this fall, Missouri and Kansas hunters should be fine. Of course, both state agencies say if a Missouri or Kansas hunter sees bubbles or white spots in a deer's rib cage or lungs, they should report it. But it will likely be a parasite or some other problem, not bovine tuberculosis. Big game hunter and former beauty queen faces backlash after claiming hobby helps with conservation. This story is from the Fox News website. A big game hunter and former beauty queen is facing backlash after she claimed in a television interview that hunting helps with anti-poaching and conservation efforts. Olivia Nalos Opre, who won the title of Miss Nebraska in 2003, spoke about her hobby on the UK-based show This Morning via Satellite Wednesday from her home in Montana. The mother of four told hosts Phillips Schofield and Holly Willoughby she's killed about 100 species of animals in 6 different countries. Her Facebook bio says she's hunted in Benin, Cameroon, Ethiopia, Mozambique, Namibia, South Africa, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Argentina, Mongolia, France, Spain, Romania, New Zealand, Mexico, Canada, and throughout the United States. She also discussed her belief that hunters are the ones that are giving so much back to preserving the wild species. Opry also claimed that organizations like Safari Club International fund research in hunting areas to make sure the numbers are sustainable. Big game hunters such as Opry often receive harsh backlash, especially online when they share images of their quote-unquote trophies. Earlier this week, a fellow big game hunter and friend of Opry's, Brittany, was shamed online for killing a leopard in Namibia. The photo of Longoria holding the carcass of the big cat went viral after it was posted on Instagram by David Bonnevier, co-founder of Not on My Planet, an organization that works to end elephant ivory poaching. It was later shared by many others, including celebrities like Naomi Campbell, Doutzen Crows, and Kyle Richards, all of whom expressed their disapproval of Longoria's hobby. Opry has also been the focus of social media backlash, with commenters calling her vile and evil, among other insults. There's a huge difference between hunting and poaching, and what hunters are doing is legal. So when you have death threats on somebody who has done something legal, it's extremely frustrating, she said. Deer fight goes viral after images of stags locked in battle emerge. This story is from the Fox News website. Images of a fight between 2 male deer went viral after the stags locked horns and wouldn't unlock them for about 2 hours. Approximately 200 images were captured by wildlife photographer Ingo Gerlach, who watched the action unfold in the Sauerland Forest, Germany, SWNS reports. But after the clash went on for more than 20 minutes, Gerlach ventured closer, noting it was an extremely hard fight. The 2 stags were evenly matched with no clear-cut winner. He added that both stags were totally exhausted and had their tongues hanging out with sweaty fur. Stags will fight each other for a variety of reasons, including an increase in testosterone, increased aggression, and during breeding season. That concludes this week's edition of the Big Buck Registry Deer News. Special thanks to Daniel Applebaum for leads on some of the stories this week. For links to the stories featured this week, please check our show notes at www.bigbuckregistry.com. If you have any ideas for future topics or have any questions about any of these topics, please email me at jim@bigbuckregistry.com. For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Well, thanks to Jim Keller for the Deer News. Without further ado, here is Aaron Stonehocker from Tactacam. Aaron Stonehocker, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. How are you, my friend?
Doing well, Jay. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're psyched to talk to you because Tactacam is a cool product, and I've seen it everywhere. I'm fascinated by its advancement and where it's come from and how far it's gotten in the industry. And I felt that it was time to break it down some more, to learn about you, the company, the products you offer, all the nuances of the product themselves, and make it part of our technology hunting series.
Perfect. Yeah, I think it's a great fit.
Very nice. So, Aaron, tell me about yourself. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? Where do you call home now?
Yeah, so that's a little bit longer story for me, having a military background, but we, both my wife and I were both born and raised in Iowa. Central Iowa is where I'm from. It's where I grew up doing most of my deer hunting, learning how to hunt, all that good stuff. And then turned 21 and joined the Air Force, went to basic training down in Texas and tech school down there. And I was a weapons loader out of the Iowa Air National Guard. And then my wife commissioned out of the University of Iowa to be active duty Air Force as a nurse. Got her nursing degree there. And her first duty station was in Langley, Virginia, Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. So that drug us out there, and I wrapped up my Air Force career, my final 2 years out there. And I was a park ranger actually for 2 years in Iowa as my civilian career, and then 3 years out in Virginia. I loved every second of that. Just Virginia is a beautiful place, but I had to get used to the deer being a heck of a lot smaller than they are in Iowa. I know that the first hunt that I went on out there, actually, it was muzzleloader season, and I was laying out there I actually had belly crawled through some switchgrass and was laying on this edge of a bean field that I've been seeing deer every night, and I got permission from the landowner to be out there, and I'm sitting there watching, and those just start filtering out in this field. And at that point I was meat hunting. I didn't care what stepped out. I was hoping a buck might, but anyway, long story short on that, I laid there for about 3 hours watching 50 deer out there in this field, and I could not decide to shoot one because they all look tiny. And I'm like, man, I can't believe I'm seeing this many 2-year-old deer or younger filtering out in this field. There's no big ones, even mature does or anything. So I called the landowner on the way home, and he was like, dude, you should have shot any one of those things. He said, that's about as big as they get. So, I think the biggest deer I shot in Virginia was, probably 120 pounds, maybe. So yeah, they're definitely a lot smaller species, but anyway, so now we did 4 years out there, did a lot of fishing, a lot of hunting, met a lot of great, lifelong friends now, that I'd love to go back and hunt with and do all that stuff. And now we're actually living up here in Great Falls, Montana. She got restationed up here at Malmstrom Air Force Base. In between there and here, obviously now I work for Tactacam full time. So I'm the communications director for them, which is nice because I can move anywhere and do it. I don't really have to worry about, looking for a new job or starting over in my career as a park ranger, every time we move. So this travels with me. Obviously, I'm a hunter diehard, and, just being able to work in the hunting industry was a pretty cool opportunity. And for this company was an even better opportunity. So I really couldn't turn it down. So
right.
That's where we're at today.
Gotcha. Do you remember your earliest hunting experience, or do you recall that?
Oh yeah. I don't know if anyone forgets that, do they?
I don't think they do, but it's always a good question to ask.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I kind of got myself into hunting a little bit. My dad, we went out pheasant hunting, in Iowa. You can kind of gravel travel or pretty much drive gravel roads and look for birds that are in the road ditches and stuff like that. We did that a handful of times. We'd go mushroom hunting, but I really never got any big game experience or even small game for that matter. For the most part, when I was growing up, I just kind of, it was just in me, I guess. So I did a lot of research through the hunting channels on TV. I could probably tell you when I was 8 or 9 years old, every single show that was going to come on at what time, because every day I was watching them and trying to learn everything I could from TV. And I got into bow hunting, I think, when I was for deer. I think I was 13 or 14. And just went out and I shot my bow every single day. Just kept, trying to get myself better and better at being more accurate. And then I had a family friend of ours actually took me out on my very first ever deer hunt. And we were sitting in a ground blind in just a small town over from where I grew up. And I remember very vividly, he had taken two entire bottles, or those little 3-ounce bottles, whatever they are, of Tink 69. And I didn't know much about, scents and stuff at the time. I was more, focused on just the hunt itself. And he takes 2 of those bottles and he just douses the entire top of the blind with it, pours it all over around the edge of the blind. And I think he was trying to use it as a cover scent. But anyway, the whole blind just stunk. And we're sitting inside and it's a hot day, like right as soon as bow season opened. And he's got one of those, the camera probably weighed 10 pounds. It was one of those old, recorded video recorders. And all of a sudden he's looking out the back of the blind. He's like, Aaron, get ready. Here comes some deer. And I'm like, okay, so I get my bow ready and the adrenaline starts. And I kind of look out the side of the blind and there's a train of bucks just walking. And I locked onto the first one that I could see. And I'm like, oh man, that's a buck. It's got horns. My first deer is going to be a buck. This is going to be so cool. And it gets out in front of the blind and I go to full draw and let the pin fly. I think it was let the arrow fly. It was about 10 or 15 yards, I think, from the blind. And the deer took off running, and just everywhere deer just took off running. And it was pretty crazy. And he said, what'd you shoot the small one for? And I said, what do you mean? He said, dude, there was a 10-pointer coming in the back. I was going to tell you to wait, but I thought you were waiting, because he was filming out the back of the blind as they were coming.
Right.
And anyway, so we go do the whole blood trail, and I think the deer went it went a little bit further than what I would have expected for the shot, but it was about 150-yard track, just, blood everywhere. It was a good, nice, easy one through some switchgrass. And so my first buck was a 5-point, had three antlers or 3 tips on one side. And then its other side was just a fork, and it was actually like broken off in the skull. So there was no skin broken or anything, but the antler was like laying there limp. One of them was. So it was, I don't know if he got in a big fight or what, but
gotcha.
So we did the little post interview with the video camera, and I thanked all my product sponsors and the whole 9 yards. So it was pretty cool. But yeah, that was my first bow hunt. And then, my first gun hunt was with my dad, and same exact thing. I ended up shooting a little buck because I was so excited. And he said, dude, a 15-point came running out by me as soon as you started shooting. So just jumping the gun a little bit.
Gotcha. Oh, you were excited. That's the way it goes.
Yeah.
And so, what's interesting to me, and I guess there's some irony here, is that earliest recollection was filmed. And now you're like thick into the working for a company that does nothing but that.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit of foreshadowing on that.
Right. Very interesting. So how did you get involved with Tactacam? How did you get a job working for this company?
So it's kind of a little bit of a long process. It kind of started back in Iowa. So I used to do, it was all kind of random. So I had a buddy in college. He was actually a buddy of mine in the National Guard. We worked in the same shop, and then he happened to go to school up there with me in Cedar Rapids. Or like his last semester, we kind of overlapped. But anyway, I got in touch with him, and he started doing some graphic design work for a couple magazines. And one of them, I believe, was called Pure Hunting Magazine. I don't think it's around anymore. And he got a hold of me one day because he knew I loved to hunt and fish and all that. And he said, hey, dude, he said, I need 1,200 words to fill up a page. I know you just, at the time I was kind of dabbling with maybe the idea of starting my own hunting TV show. Obviously I love to hunt. I'd gotten out there. I'd started, getting a few low end cameras here and there, trying to figure out the hunting thing or the filming thing. And I'd started a Facebook page for that called Light the Fire Outdoors, which was hopefully the name of the show I was going to start. So anyway, he's like, I don't care if you tell a story about that, tell a hunt story, whatever, just if you can fill 1,200 words, man, we'll get you, an article in this magazine. So I ended up writing the story of kind of where I think the hunting passion started with me, which I remember growing up at my grandpa's house. We were over at my grandparents' house all the time on my mom's side. And, he only had, I think, 1 or 2 hunting stories ever, in his, back in the days when Iowa first opened the first deer season. He remembers all that. But he always had a beautiful 11-point rack hanging in the garage. And I think part of his stories and just looking at that deer rack is kind of where the hunting thing started with me. So I wrote a story a little bit about how my fire got started with the outdoors, and it got published in the magazine. I thought it was pretty neat. I've got the magazine still here in my office. And anyway, so then we kind of went through that whole transition and moved out or right before we moved to Virginia, that summer, I used to do competitive weightlifting as well. So I was doing the bench press competition at the Iowa State Fair. And so you do your 3 lifts, and then, they wait for the rest of the day for everybody else to go through and tally the scores and all that. So I was walking around with my parents, and we happened to just walk through one of the industry buildings there. And my mom saw the Iowa Sportsman magazine booth, and she's like, oh, Aaron, hey, you should go check out that magazine and tell them about your article. Cause she obviously, as any mom would be, she's super proud that her boy got an article published. It was the coolest thing for her. So anyway, and I'm like, no, Mom, that's fine. And she, of course, starts dragging me over there and it's like, no, we're going to go tell him. And so she's telling them all about how I'm this published writer and stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, here we go. And anyway, the guy was like, well, dude, he's like, we're always looking for new writers, like, what do you do? Like, what do you hunt for? What do you fish for? All that. And so I told him pretty much anything and everything, and told him the story about that article. And he's like, yeah, man, he's like, we're always looking for new writers. I told him about Light the Fire Outdoors, and he goes, yeah, here's the business card information for the editor of this magazine. And then she's like, dude, you like to film your hunts? He said, you need to check out this new product. He said, they just started advertising with us. He grabbed one of his sample magazines there and flipped open to the page that had a Tactacam ad in it. And I'd never heard of him at the time, but I was literally, I had the money saved up, and I was just kind of in that final research stage of actually buying some of our competitors' cameras and, all the mounts that I thought I would need to try to make that happen, and some other stuff. And it was a pretty good chunk of change that I was ready to spend on some cameras. And then I saw this, and just looking at it, the design of the camera, I'm like, okay, I already like that better. It looks like it's going to fit way better on my equipment, and all the mounts that they were advertising in there, were made to go on your weapon. I'm like, dude, this thing looks really cool, but I'll do my research, So, and then anyway, we head out, and we end up moving out to Virginia before I, really thought much more about it. With moving expenses up, I kind of put the cameras on hold on buying those. Well, when I get out there, and I was finishing up my bachelor's degree at the time one day, and I was, bored and procrastinating some paper or something. So I just started Googling Tactacam, and I started watching some videos that were out, and they looked really good. I liked how, the side-by-side comparisons of any of the competitors that they would compare it against. The footage is so much closer and all that. And I'm like, man, this has got to be the ticket. So I actually called the customer service line, I had a few questions. I can't even remember what they were now about the cameras, just to kind of finalize my purchase decision. And Ben Stern, and he's the guy who actually invented the camera, but I didn't know it at the time. He picks up the phone on the customer service line. We're talking, and he's answering all my questions. And at the end of it, I said, I know you guys are a new company. I said, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? I said, are you, just you work in customer service, or, what do you do? And he's like, oh, no, man, I actually invented that camera. And I'm like, get out of here. There's no way I'm talking to the guy who invented the camera on the customer service line. And he goes, yeah. So I said, well, now you got to tell me your story. So he kind of told me the whole backstory, where he is now, where he was when he started, and the original camera, the whole 9 yards. And I just thought it was the coolest thing. And then a week later, I called back. I thought of one more question to ask, and Jeff Peel answered the phone, and I didn't know who he was either. And same thing, I thought he was customer service, and he ends up telling me, no, man, I'm the CEO of the company. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. I said, just take my money. At this point, I like your cameras. I can't believe I've talked to the CEO and the guy who started the company in the first 2 phone calls I've ever made to him. So, no matter what, I'm sold at this point. So I get my first camera. And then about a month after that, I got out, did some filming. I was dabbling with the backyard. I mounted it to my lawnmower to kind of test the vibration abuse it could take, and mounted it to my dog, and anything I could mount that thing to, I was mounting it to, just getting random footage. And then a month later, I get a call from a gentleman they had working for him at the time, and he told me to check my email. And they just started up a pro staff program, and he had a welcome to the Tactacam's pro staff acceptance letter in there. So I went in and did that for a little bit, got on their pro staff. That was exciting. And then I learned really quickly how hunting in Virginia is a lot different than hunting in Iowa, and learning all these new places, it can be tough. And I really didn't get much hunting footage, really. And so I kind of felt bad. I just joined this pro staff and stuff. So I just started taking the camera around to my local bow shops that I was shooting league in and all that, and just trying to get people excited about it like I was. And, just trying to get, if anything else, I could just promote it that way. So, kind of did that for, I suppose, about a year. And then, one thing kind of led to another out there. And, I was obviously progressing in my park ranger career out there, and that was going well. And Jeff Peel randomly got a hold of me one day. And I had volunteered a couple of times to work a couple of trade shows. I know you've probably been to the Harrisburg show in Pennsylvania. It's probably one of the biggest in the country. And I went up there a couple of times to help him out, just anything I could. I was trying to help him out, and just, I loved the product, and I knew it was a small company. I wanted to help him any way I could. So Jeff got a hold of me one day, and he said, look, man, you've been around, we've had this program out for a year. You've been on it. You've always been out there kind of going above and beyond, doing these different things. What would you think about if you could run a pro staff program for us? He just kind of laid a couple of guidelines out there, what would you do with it? How would you run it? What ideas would you have? And, how would you just make it work? And he told me that just, put something together in an email, shoot it to me. We'll revisit it in about a week or two. So what ended up starting as just an email turned into this big 13-page report thing of I just compiled all these ideas and tried to organize the structure of it. And I sent that up to him. Well, I didn't hear back from him for about a month. And finally, I'm like, I don't know if that's a good thing or not. So I called one of my other friends that I'd met while working at the Harrisburg show that worked for the company. Frank Lemus is his name. He's a retired Army guy. He's a really cool dude. But anyway, I got a hold of him and I said, look, I don't want to push, anything right now. I don't know Jeff all that well. I've never officially met him, but I said, here's the deal. Here's where we're at. And I said, I'm kind of getting a little, antsy because it got me excited, but, is it okay to call him? Should I just wait? He's like, no, dude. He's like, Jeff's so busy. He said, if you don't knock his door down, he said, you will not get a hold of him. So he said, don't worry about it. And he said, if he gives you any grief, tell him Frank said so. So I called him back, and I think I called him 2 or 3 times that next week, just, periodically. And finally he answered one of the time. He's like, oh man, he said, I haven't been ignoring you. He said, we've been so busy. He said, I saw that thing was 13 pages. He said, I didn't have the time to go through it yet, but let's sit down tonight and go through it. And so we bounced some more ideas off each other, and we kind of went back and forth for a few more months. And then he, at the end of the day, I just don't know if he was 100% sold on the idea of kind of where we were going with it, or maybe that they were quite ready for the direction that we got it now. So we hung it on the shelf, and it took about a year to get back. And Jeff called me one day and he said, you know what, Aaron, he said, I kind of wanted to watch you a little bit and see how you reacted, because I know you'd worked really hard on this and you got your hopes up for it, but you never changed your attitude. You kept out there. I really respect that. And he said, well, how would you like to put all that stuff into motion and just do it part-time. He said, do you have time to do that? And I said, yeah, absolutely. So after work, I would make phone calls and start recruiting team members. And, my drive home, I had about an hour drive back and forth there in Virginia between the park and my home. And so every night I'd make phone calls and interview people and get them signed up for the team and get them excited. And then eventually, I think 2 or 3 months later, he got a hold of me again and said, hey, if we're going to do this, we got to do it right. And I need you on full time if you can do it. And so thought about it a little bit, talked about it with the wife, and, thought it was a good direction. One of those opportunities, I think I'd kick myself all over the place if I never jumped on it. So I just put in my 2 weeks at the park, and now I'm working for Tactacam, and I've been here about a year and a half, I suppose. I think it was a year in May is when I started. So
gotcha.
We're getting almost 2 years. Yep.
No kidding. So speaking of the history of the company, or your initial, you made a couple calls. You talked to the inventor of the camera, then you talked to the CEO. They must have had some roots, right, in the origins of Tactacam. Can you tell us a little bit how this whole camera concept got started?
Yeah. So Ben Stern, he's just a small town guy, life of the party guy out of Holman, Wisconsin. He had gotten into hunting. I think he'd been hunting his whole life. His whole family's a bunch of hunters. And just one of those things where he's kind of a tech guy anyway. I think most people would classify him as probably the nerd of the people who own the company. He's the nerd of the group. Just super tech savvy. He's super creative. And, one day he was just dabbling around, and he knew people from college and stuff that could do different things and knew how to make different parts of cameras and whatever. And, his background's actually in photography, so he knows his way around a camera pretty well. And, he was out hunting one day. I said, look, I want to start filming these things, or figure out a way I can film it from my weapon to just share my memories out in the field. And so he just started, getting a hold of some of his contacts and putting pieces together. And the original camera is actually, it's a microchip, a camera lens, a vibrate motor, and an LED light. And it's all like medically taped together. So, and he still has it today. And it's the coolest thing when you look at it. It has no casing on or anything, but he used to tape that on his bow until he could get it, tweak this, tweak that. And he eventually got it the way he wanted. And so he decided to take his idea to the next level and actually turn it into what's now the Tactacam 2.0 kind of design. There was a little bit of tweaks they made to it to make it the 2.0, but essentially it was a metal housing, about a 3.5 ounce camera like it is today, super light. And it was made of aluminum at the time. It was waterproof down to like 90 feet. And just, he got it to where they could start selling them. He got a business partner, and then, fast forward a few months and insert Jeff Peel at a trade show, him and Tara Peel, his wife. Jeff's now the CEO of the company. They met Ben at a trade show. They loved the idea of the camera. Ben was kind of in a situation from a business perspective that he could, really use some help. Otherwise, I don't think you guys would even know about Tactacam today if Jeff had never, Jeff and Ben's paths had never met. And they did, which is a good thing. And Jeff kind of took it over, and man, everything's just escalated like crazy. But I think the coolest thing about, this idea in this company is knowing, like, Jeff and Tara and Ben essentially lived at during trade show season, which for any outdoors enthusiasts out there, is usually January 1st through about the end of May is just crazy trade show season. The industry's, traveling all over the place trying to get their customers the products in hand. And but anyway, these guys would just pull a trailer with them, and they'd travel from trade show to trade show to trade show with boxes of camera parts. At night, they would build cameras. They'd build so many to bring to the show that day. They'd fill any online orders that had happened by building the cameras, packaging them, and dropping them off to the post office on the way to the trade show the next day. And that was, 2 years of that company is literally just all hands on deck, building cameras to all hours of the night and making it happen. So, just definitely, like you said, from the ground up, everybody that's at Tactacam today has got some kind of, messy hands, so to speak. They've all put the blood, sweat, and tears into it. And now it's starting to get really cool. People really are starting to recognize the brand. The camera has come light years from where it was. Now they got the 4K resolution, 8x zoom. It's got a remote control that you can just, like your TV's off, the remote's off, but you can turn them both on at the same time. It's just it's getting crazy. So I think, and there's a lot of cool things that are still in the books that I can't probably talk about without Jeff firing me. So, so stay tuned on some of them because it'll be pretty neat.
Right. Good things to come. Well, it sounds like, it was a grassroots kind of start 'em up kind of thing where you, or the company, it's almost like the band selling DVD, or not DVDs, the band selling CDs out of the back of their car on the street trying to get things to go. And it worked. It's one of those things.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Awesome. It's a great product. Let's, if we could, let's start breaking down some of the products that you have at Tactacam, the different cameras, and what each of them do, and some of the other products that you have to offer.
Yeah. So the company's been around for about 4.5 years. For the first 2 years of that, a lot of customers out there still have them. I've still got mine. The Tactacam 2.0 was the name of the game. It was really the only camera out there that could do what it could do, and it still is today. Tactacam is for hunters. But, like I said, it was a metal camera. It was waterproof down to 90 feet, just one button on top. That's all you hit the button one time, turns on, and starts recording. That's the whole premise behind Tactacam. It's super simple to use. You press the button one time and you're going to get your hunt on film,
right?
As long as you can keep the camera pointed at what you're shooting at. So
it's quick activation kind of thing. Because in the moment, we all know in the moment, you don't really have time to think. But if all you have to do is push one button, and this is funny because I frequently see this. You see somebody dragging a nice deer out, and then you take a look and you're like, you have a Tactacam on that bow. Yeah, I do. Did you push the button? Oh, I forgot.
I forgot. Yep. If you're at a trade show with me at all, I tell everybody that as long as you can remember to hit the button, you're going to get your hunt on film.
Right. It happens.
Yep, it does. Like you said, the heat of the moment, and everybody's a hunter first, which really is why Tactacam's such a cool thing for the average Joe. Heck, Lee and Tiffany are probably the biggest stars in the industry. They use them and they love it because it's so easy. It's so light. You don't even know it's there. As long as, again, if you can train yourself to just reach up and hit that button, it's that simple to get your hunt on film.
Right.
And now, we've progressed to when they came out with the new product design, which is what is now the Tactacam 4.0, they revisited the housing. They, due to patents and stuff, they actually started switching some pieces around. So now everything is proprietary to Tactacam there. Which is pretty neat. The housing, we walked away from the metal and went into a polymer housing because of the, just to eliminate any kind of extra noise that might be there. Sliding the camera in and out of the stabilizer mount, you have a little bit of metal on metal contact with the old camera. Now you don't have it. It's like coated in kind of a rubber material, so you don't have to worry about gripping it. All the mounts you don't have to tighten them very tight because of that grip that's on the camera itself. The camera's not going anywhere. You don't have to worry about the camera slipping or anything. And they're a little bit lighter now. They're about 3.3 ounces, again, which is nothing a hunter's going to notice on his weapon. But what they did is they came out with a 3 and a 4.0, and that was a test run for the market. The 4.0 had the built-in Wi-Fi antenna. The 3.0 did not, and it was, again, just to test the market. The 4.0 sold like 4 or 5 to 1 over the 3s, and now we just have the 4.0. So the 4.0 camera, it's got your 5x zoom, 2.7K max resolution. It's got a slow motion mode built in there. So on top of the camera, you're going to see 2 buttons. One's your power button, same exact concept. You hit the button one time, camera comes on and start recording. And then you've got your mode button in the back that allows you to switch between the 2.7K resolution at a 3x zoom, 5x zoom at 1080p resolution. Then your slow motion on the 4.0 is a built-in. It's 720p at 120 frames a second. And then this year, the cream of the crop that has come out now is our Tactacam 5.0 series. You will love the 4.0. I've got 2 or 3 of them that I still run. I've got a couple 5s now, but what the 5 can do, for the tech guy, it's going to be great. You can actually customize any of the modes that you want. Still got 3 modes in it, but I can custom set them to whatever zoom I want, up to 8x zoom now. Up to 4K resolution, and slow motion actually has 2 different frame rates. You've got 240 for super slow-mo and 120 for just your regular slow-mo. And then it's got the Tactacam 5.0 remote, which, like I said, there's a lot of cameras out there, and a lot of our customers are saying, man, if you just had a remote, that'd really sell me. And so we came out with it this year. But the coolest thing about Tactacam's remote system is that it doesn't take the camera being on and the remote being synced up with some sort of a Bluetooth or a Wi-Fi effect for the camera and the remote to work together. And almost every other camera you've got out there, you have to turn the camera on, connect the remote, then the remote and the camera are sucking batteries like crazy, and it's just not effective for the hunter. So this allows you to turn on up to 5 cameras the exact same way you would normally turn on your Tactacam. You just push the remote button one time. Any of those 5 cameras that are synced to the remote at that time turn on and automatically start recording. So, this makes it even cooler for the guy. Like for me, I've got a wide angle lens that we came out with this year as well. That one's built more around the fishing aspect, gives you a little bit wider field of view for seeing the whole boat. I love it for kayak fishing. I can see on both sides of the boat when I'm reeling in fish. I don't really have to worry about turning my head too much. But also that selfie angle, being able to point a camera back at you to capture your expression, and then having my regular lens camera with my 8x zoom or whatever mode I have it in facing forward. I just hit the button in my pocket on the remote. Now both cameras come on. I don't have to do anything else. So I can just, strap my release up and hopefully hit my target. So
gotcha.
Yep. Just some really cool stuff. The cameras are all completely weatherproof. You never have to worry about hunting in the pouring rain, which is a huge thing for guys that love getting out there and filming in any kind of weather. Other cameras, you've got to somehow enclose them or, put an umbrella over your tree, which can make all kinds of noise and things like that. This strap the camera on your bow. It doesn't matter what the weather throws at you that day. You're good to go. They've got a full microphone in them as well, which is actually, of all the things these cameras can do, for a point of view camera, that's probably my favorite feature is the fact that it has a microphone that doesn't require any extra accessory, doesn't require you to plug anything in, and it captures audio like you wouldn't believe. It'll pick up turkeys gobbling, from my personal experience, out to 200 yards. It'll pick up, I had a deer, actually a muzzleloader deer this year. I actually ran out of camera light on it because I was back in the woods a little too far, and I could hear the deer coming in. I kept the video to this day. The deer comes in, it starts walking in about 50 yards is where I can hear it, because I knew where it was coming on the trail, and the camera's picking up his footsteps on pine needles all the way up underneath the tree until he walks out into the field. And then all you see on the video, because the camera has an amazing low light sensor, it'll pick up any light that's available if it's dark. And all you see is the muzzle flash go off, and then you hear the deer take off. So it's a well-rounded camera. Like I said, the average Joe now can just put together some really cool videos. Guys who are already filming for shows or YouTube channels, whatever, it's a great addition to that. Really makes it a more well-rounded feature, and they've got a second angle for everything. So
wow, all right.
Really cool.
So on your website, you've got 4 different cameras that are available, and I want to go through some of the features on each one as you described just recently. So you've got the Tactacam Solo. You've got the Tactacam 4.0. You've got the Tactacam 5.0 wide lens, and then the Tactacam 5.0.
Yeah.
Now, each of these cameras are waterproof. Is that correct?
So they are completely sealed. We rate them for weatherproof. The difference between that's a very common question. I'm glad you asked me that. So this camera is not going to get affected. Like let's say we're out duck hunting, right? And we're setting decoys, and I'm waist deep in water. I've got my gun over my shoulder, and my gun slips off or something while I'm setting decoys. If that gun goes down, pick the gun up, the camera strapped to it, it's not going to be affected at all by that. When I kayak fish, I usually will keep an extra camera with me in my vest. And if I, bring in a decent sized fish or just for some extra footage, I'll actually dunk it under the water about elbow deep and, just bring the fish in right in front of the camera, or I'll let the fish go in front of the camera for some underwater footage.
Wow. It
will stand some of that. So the camera's completely sealed. We don't rate these for waterproof because we switched to that polymer housing. Water pressures at depths and moving water, they can flex just about anything, and polymer especially. So you start getting too deep with it. I would say anything deeper than 3 feet, you're starting to play with fire on it.
Okay.
To where the water pressure might affect that. It might cause a leak. You just don't want to get it wet. But the camera is weatherproof. It will, like I said, if it's pouring rain on you, I've done plenty of videos just while it's pouring, just setting the camera outside and letting them film a puddle or something, just so people can see that, the water droplets and things are actually nailing the camera. But yeah, the weather's never going to affect it. Light underwater use is fine. We don't recommend it, but yeah, it's not rated for waterproof because of that reason. It can flex. Yeah.
Okay. All of them. We'll get into some of the individual features on each of these in a sec, but so all of them are weatherproof. Some underwater capacity, but not really strongly recommended for long periods of time or depths. And
yes, sir.
All of them have the quick action, one button push. Let's get this on film now kind of strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's get into some of the battery life. How do you charge these things, and how long do they last?
Yeah, so the battery is going to last on any of our cameras. So our Solo all the way through the 5.0 series, all those batteries are 2.5 hour battery life. It's a lithium-ion rechargeable battery, so you don't really have to worry about. You can abuse them a little bit; they're not going to lose battery life on you, that kind of thing. That 2.5 hours is full record time. So there's a couple things that go into that. The resolution that it's in, the harder the camera's got to work, is going to suck a little bit more battery, but it's also going to fill a SD card space. So typically it's a 2.5 hour or plus that amount for battery life. But again, that's if I press the record button on any of those cameras and I set it on a table or I forget the camera's on, it will record for a full 2.5 hours or until the SD card fills up, at which point it'll just stop recording. But for the Hunter, we're filming everything from 30 seconds to 5-minute clips at a time, typically, as long as you can remember to pause the camera. The camera's got an auto shut off feature after you can set to whatever time you want. I got mine set all to 10 minutes just because, again, you never know, just because that doe came in and walked off and the buck wasn't right there doesn't mean he's not going to come in the next minute or so, so just being able to reach up and hit it. So yeah, they've got an auto shut off feature if they're paused. 2.5 hours of full record time on the battery. They charge through the camera, or we do sell battery chargers as an accessory as well. So the cameras come with a battery charger. It's a micro USB or mini USB, sorry. That's just like your cell phone. You plug the block into the wall, plug the other end in the camera, and the battery will charge in the camera. It takes about 3 to 4 hours. If the camera's completely dead, the battery's dead, inside the camera, it will take about 4 hours to charge from completely dead all the way to full. You got to dumb down when you're, feeding electricity through, an electronic piece of equipment. You've got to kind of dumb it down a little bit, which is why it takes longer. The battery chargers will charge 2 batteries in about 2 hours if they're completely dead. So it's a nice accessory to have, especially if you're going to carry multiple batteries with you. I always carry an extra battery with me in my pack. Again, I'd rather have an extra and be safe than sorry. But having said that, I always charge my camera before I go out, so I know it's a full battery, and I've never had to replace a battery on a single hunt. And again, a lot of times I'll go 4, 5, 6, 7 days, depending on how many days they're going consecutive without changing batteries, just because, like I said, you're filming 30 seconds to 5 minutes at a time. It takes a long time to fill up 2.5 hours of a battery.
Right. Okay. As far as the individual cameras are concerned, we talked about there are 4 different ones. What's the Solo cam or Tactacam Solo all about? What's the purpose of that one?
Yeah, so the Tactacam Solo it's kind of your entry level camera. So, we wanted to have something because our camera is built for anyone to be able to share their hunt. That's the mission of the company. They want people out there capturing their memories and bringing them home to their family and friends. So it's the whole point of it. Our 4.0 lineup, it retails at $329.99. So that price point, we recognize that maybe it's not a good fit for everybody, but it doesn't mean everybody shouldn't be able to have a camera that can get out there and do the job as well as Tactacam can, so they can still bring those memories home. So the Tactacam Solo fits that bill. The price point's quite a bit lower. At $199, we actually have a Tactacam Bone Collector edition out as well that you'll be seeing a lot more of here in the future. So the Tactacam Solo, just simple. It's like the 2.0, but it's the upgraded size and housing of the 4.0 and 5.0. So all the mounts now are compatible camera series wide. So it doesn't matter what camera you have, all your mounts are going to work on your cameras. But it's one button on top. You just simply hit the button, camera comes on, it starts recording. It's got a built-in 1080p resolution, 3x zoom, no frills. Press the button again to pause it, press and hold to shut it off. So it's just your simple, anybody that's going to be out there, whether you're maybe a waterfowl hunter or an upland hunter or a bow hunter who your longest shot's 30 yards, this camera is going to do everything you want it to do. It's got the full microphone. It's going to be perfect for that guy who doesn't want to spend a lot of money but wants to get out there and film their hunts. And it's just, again, it's brainless. It's one button. So the Tactacam Solo fits the entry level camera. If you're looking to get involved and getting to start filming your hunts, this camera is great for those guys.
It's kind of mind boggling that you have a microphone capacity in each one of these things. And it's still weatherproof. You don't see that. That's not a common thing that you get in a camera.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't have to sacrifice any of the weatherproofing with it, which is the best part about that microphone. Because, like you said, typically, a lot of other, the companies that, hunters try to use for point of view cameras and things like that, you've got to plug in an external mic if you want any kind of usable audio at all. And that just completely usually will throw out the concept of it being waterproof or weatherproof or whatever. So It's definitely a big factor.
And moving on to the Tactacam 4.0, that's the precursor to the 5.
Mm-hmm.
It's a step up from the Solo. What else does the Tactacam 4.0 do?
Yeah, so this is where you start getting into your bells and whistles. So, like I said, the resolution on the Solo was 1080p, and that's just built in. You don't have any options with it. On the Tactacam 4.0, you have 3 different resolution options. You've actually got more than that, but I'll explain that in a second. So, you've got 3 different modes. Same concept. That you push the button once, the camera's going to come on and start recording in whatever mode the camera's in. You have battery indicator lights now. You're also going to have a Wi-Fi indicator light on top of that camera, and there's going to be a second button that you can adjust your modes with. So you turn the camera on, it gets recording, you press the button, it'll pause the camera, and then you can switch to the modes on the Tactacam 4.0. Your green light is going to indicate that you're in your 2.7K resolution mode, so a pretty big upgrade from the 1080p of the Tactacam Solo. Just a quick snippet on resolution. Your higher resolutions allow you to post edit things with a higher zoom rate before they get kind of grainy. So if you're going to be, doing a lot of post editing work, stuff like that, that high resolution is kind of important for that. But at the end of the day, any HD channel for the most part that you watch on TV is in 1080. So that 1080 is going to be a solid setting. It'll also get more SD card space the higher resolution you have. So you do have 2.7K resolution. That mode is in 3x zoom. So for 3x zoom, what I like to tell people, just if you look out your backyard window or whatever, anything from 5 feet to 1,000 yards is going to look exactly how your eyes see it. That's what the 3x zoom concept is.
Okay.
And then you have another mode. So it's a purple or a dark blue button, whatever your eyes see. So you hit the button one time, it'll switch modes on you. The dark blue mode is going to be your 5x zoom. So now, for guys who want to shoot 50 yards, 70 yards, 100 yards, that 5x zoom brings that target that much closer. So that video is a little bit more usable for you. Even with the naked eye, something standing at 100 yards is pretty small. And the whole premise behind Tactacam is it sees what your eyes see versus pushing the target away. But, if you only had the 3x zoom, it'll still look far away. I know you want to make sure that video is up close for you to see and show your family and friends. And then you have the slow motion mode. So you hit the button one more time, the camera will go over into its slow motion mode. Again, that's 720p resolution, and then at 120 frames a second. So it's like I said, a few more bells and whistles, but the camera, probably the biggest feature on it is going to be the Wi-Fi. You have the modes, which is pretty cool, but the camera has a built-in Wi-Fi antenna. So what that allows you to do is if you're out in the tree stand and let's just say you just smoked a buck at 20 yards, but you were like, oh man, I really don't know if I made a good shot. You can actually turn the camera's Wi-Fi on and then pull out your smartphone. There's a Tactacam app you download off the App Store. It's free. It's called just the Tactacam app is all it's called. And you hook your camera and your phone up together. Your phone will respond to the Wi-Fi from the camera, and you just log in, click whatever camera's connected, and it'll let you replay that footage or any footage that's on the camera for that matter. It'll allow you to go back in and have that instant replay ability. So you can go back in, you can watch your arrow, fly all the way down to the target. You can pause it so you can really see where you hit the deer, that kind of thing. Plus, you can actually save the videos right to your phone, maybe text your buddy who's over in the next tree stand over so you can just show him what you just did. So it's really, really cool. It allows you to instant replay. On the 4.0, you can use your phone at that point to remote control the camera. So there's a few, things you can do that way. I know we have some pretty cool footage of guys, they'll put them down on a deer trail. It's, pretty heavily traveled. They'll be up in a tree stand 10 yards from it and, be remote controlling the camera with their phone, and a deer will walk right over the top of the camera or whatever. We've got some pretty cool things that happen that way, but just another thing you can do. I know a lot of, dads and moms who are taking their kids out for the first time. I've heard them really like that feature for the same concept. The kids got the camera on the gun or the bow and they're sitting there watching live what that camera is doing because it live streams to the phone as well. So
wow. Okay.
Anything that camera's pointed at, you're getting a firsthand look at exactly what the camera's seeing. So they get to kind of watch as it happens. Plus they get the video to show everybody else. It's pretty neat.
Gotcha. So the Tactacam Solo doesn't have that, but as soon as you jump to the 4.0, that's where the Wi-Fi capacity gets into play.
Yeah, okay. And we're getting ready to do some stuff with that too. So I did mention the Bone Collector edition that's out.
Yep.
You can find those in some retailers and things like that. But or get involved with your conservation organizations. We have a lot of those guys that use those as well. But the Tactacam Bone Collector Solo does have Wi-Fi built into it. So once we get all these things up and running, hopefully all of our cameras are just going to have the Wi-Fi as an option because it's so popular. Again, we don't want a guy to necessarily have to jump that huge price point if he can't afford it just to get the Wi-Fi. So it does allow any hunter at that point to be able to have that Wi-Fi instant replayability. But yeah, the standard Solo does not. The Tactacam Bone Collector Solo does, but the 4.0 series is where the bells and whistles and the Wi-Fi definitely kick in.
Okay. And do all of these have the low light resolution capacity, or does that jump up once you get up to the higher levels?
Yeah, they all do. Your Tactacam Solos, you're limited because you don't have the option to adjust the low light capability with your frame rate. So for low light, and I'm sure every hunter out there that's watched a hunting TV show has heard one time or another, oh, we ran out of camera light. And so your eyes, our eyes are pretty magnificent. We'll be able to pick up light typically a lot longer than any electronic version that tries to mimic a human eye will be able to pick up. And it all depends on your lens and everything else. So when you're talking for a point of view camera, our cameras do extremely well for a point of view camera in low light. The Tactacam Solo, it's got a built-in 60 frames a second, which is okay for low light. But what you're going to run into is you're going to be able to definitely film out to the last 15 minutes shooting light in just about every situation. The biggest difference it's going to be is if you're hunting in the timber and it's you got a pretty heavy canopy, not allowing a lot of light in, that's where you're going to start to run out of that camera light. Now, if you're sitting on a field edge, depending on cloud cover and that kind of thing, there's a good chance you'll be able to film past legal shooting light just with your Tactacam Solo. When you go up into the 4.0, the low light sensor in that is quite a bit better. It helps out in the real low light situations, but what you're going to be able to do with a 4.0 is adjust your frame rate. So that's kind of where the different modes play a little bit more of a factor too. So in your 3x zoom 2.7K resolution mode, that's at 30 frames a second. So for those people who don't know, everything on a camera is based off frame rate because it's the term motion picture comes from the same thing. So what it's doing is taking 30 pictures every second, which when you watch them in sequence is where you get the video effect, right?
Right.
So 30 pictures a second leaves that aperture open a lot longer than 60 frames does and a lot longer than 120 frames does. The shorter amount of time that aperture is open taking pictures means less and less light's getting into the camera. So if I was anybody and I've got a Tactacam 4.0, I always switch mine, even no matter how far my shot might be, I always switch mine to the green mode. That way I'm at 30 frames a second. I'm getting the best low light capability that I can. If you've got it hooked up to your phone, you can actually adjust for an even slower frame rate. But as soon as you shut the phone off, the camera reverts back to its initial settings. So that 30 frames is going to be your best. And then but with like that muzzleloader deer I was telling you about is a good example. So I ran out of camera light in because I was back in the timber a little ways. The deer was standing in the field when I shot him. Well, that muzzle flash coming out of the barrel at 3 feet in front of that camera was enough to like light up the camera. Like you see the muzzle flash, even though it's a pitch black picture, you're listening to the deer walk in. And then I was able to actually track him with my flashlight. It's pitch black outside. It was a cloudy night, so there's no light coming in. I've got my Tactacam 4.0 on my head, and I've got a flashlight and I'm following his blood trail through this field. And you see exactly on a black screen, you're looking at the ground where my flashlight's lighting it up. And that works out to about, depending on the power of that light, I've got guys that send in all kinds of predator hunting videos now with red lights. I've seen a fox get shot at just about 100 yards. Coyote hunters, depending on what kind of light they're using and its power, it'll pick up whatever light's available, even if it's pitch black, which is really, really cool. Then you jump into our 5.0 and the low light sensor on that thing is ridiculous. We were out testing it with we were out setting trail cameras actually on one of Jeff's hunting properties. And there were some deer out in the field. They're about 50 or 60 yards away from us. And it was getting to the point where you're kind of seeing silhouettes, more than anything with your naked eye. We got home and we were just playing with the cameras, kind of seeing what they would do. We get home, we plug them into the computer and we're watching, and the camera was actually picking up more light than our eyes were, which was pretty darn outstanding, especially for a point of view. Yeah. So with my 5.0, I don't think I'd question its ability to get you out past legal shooting time. So that'll definitely be a cool factor for everybody.
That's intense. So jumping from the 4.0 to the 5.0, now we just talked about how it picks up higher low light capacities. Mm-hmm. What else is different between the Tactacam 4.0 and the 5.0 and also the wide lens between the two 5.0s?
Yeah, so your 4.0, like I said, it's got the built-in features. You've got your standard mode, you've got your zoom mode, you've got your slow motion mode. You go into the Tactacam 5.0 and it's got all the same things. So it's going to operate just like the 4.0 does. You're going to see the same lights, same colors. Each of the modes is going to kind of be a similar feature. The difference is where you can actually customize your modes now to do whatever you want them to do based on your hunting situation. And you've got the Tactacam 5.0 remote as an accessory option, which is really, really cool. So when you're looking at your modes in the 5.0, you jump up from 2.7K in standard mode to 4K in standard mode, which, again, for the tech guy, everything seems to be moving in that 4K direction. For the average Joe, 4K is cool, but I just don't think, I think it could potentially, just because the ability of the camera it's going to slow your camera down if you don't know what you're doing, and it's going to be tougher to edit, tougher to watch on your phone, on your computer, because everything's got to be built to run that speed. So for the tech guy, like I said, who's out there editing and stuff, it's a great feature. You can zoom in pretty much infinitely, and it's not going to get blurry on you, that kind of thing. But it's cool for the guys that just have to have 4K, and plus it helps us to compete with our other competitors that are out there. So you have your 4K resolution. You've got your 8x zoom now instead of the 5x zoom that was in the 4.0. And the neat thing with the 5.0 is I can actually custom adjust whatever zoom I want it to be. So if I want one mode and 1x zoom, I can go all the way down to 1x, and then I can bring it all the way up to 8 on my next mode or whatever. So you have the 8x zoom that's customizable. And then your third mode is your slow motion mode. That's now at 1080p. So it's actually in high definition in slow motion at 120 frames, but then you also have the ability to customize that to a super slow motion in 240 frames a second, which is really, really cool. So like I said, just all the modes that we have are upgraded. And then when you're connected to the Tactacam Wi-Fi and you hook it up to the Tactacam app on your phone, any of the modes that it's in, you can actually customize them to be whatever you want. So let's say my green mode that would default to 4K at 3x zoom, I can hook it up to my phone. I can drop that resolution down to 1080p just because I personally know I'll never need 4K for what I do with it with my editing stuff. And then maybe instead of 3x zoom, I want it at 6x zoom. So I can toggle that up to 6. And maybe that's the perfect setting I need for whatever I'm doing. Let's say deer hunting at 40, 50 yards. But then I know I'm going to need a long range version because now I'm out in Montana. I can shoot with my rifle out to 200 yards. I'm going to want to, have an 8x zoom mode at 1080p resolution and or maybe 4K, whatever. I can do that. And then my slow motion mode, I can set it to 240 frames, just for some really cool footage if I have the opportunity to get it. So again, the custom ability for the 5.0 is really the biggest advantage over the 4. And then the increased zoom, I would say, is probably the next biggest. Microphone's the same and all that, but the other selling point is the remote. So the remote actually comes as an accessory. It doesn't come with the camera, and you don't need it to operate the camera. All of our cameras, like I've said a few times here, is one button. Push the button on the camera. It's going to come on and start recording in whatever mode you have it in. But with the remote, I can do this at a distance now of 30 yards. I can set the camera out 30 yards away from me, maybe facing backwards if I'm in a ground blind, and I know the deer is going to walk between me and that camera. So now I can get 2 angles, one on the backside, one from the blind on my other camera, and I can turn them both on with my remote. I don't have to be right on top of the camera. I don't have to, maybe I'm in a situation where I can't move. The deer's got me pinned down up in the tree. I've got my wide camera facing me and my other camera facing down. Well, instead of missing it, I can, if my hand's in my pocket or whatever, I can hit the button on the remote. Both cameras come on. I don't have to worry about it. So it allows you, again, to control up to 5 cameras with one remote. So you can turn 5 different cameras on. They're all going to come on and start recording at the same time, which for guys that video edit, that just takes one step out of your editing sequence, is trying to sync up the different angles you had. If you're using Tactacams, all your angles are going to be on at the same time and start recording at the same time. So that's pretty neat.
So how many cameras at the same time can you turn on?
Up to 5.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
so if you've got
the moment's upon you and you can just boom, trigger, boom. Okay, now it's on. We don't know exactly what angle we need to hit, but we've got it covered.
Exactly. Yeah. And I know Ben Stern, the guy who invented the camera, he just got a pretty solid deer video. And I think he had 4 cameras running or 5. He had one on the ground. He had 2 up in the tree above him. He had one on his bow and then one facing back at him on his bow. And just with the remote, he had them all 5 running. He actually got a really big buck, which was pretty cool up in Wisconsin.
Gotcha. And then you said that you use the wide lens for fishing more often than not. Is there any other applications to the wide lens for the 5.0 that, it has all the other features of the 5, but does the 5.0 wide lens have any other capacities that you can think of?
Oh, absolutely. So what I would, if you're going to have, I guess for argument's sake, you can pretty much film all with point of view cameras now that Tactacam's out, all the stuff you would need to put together a small production for TV or YouTube or whatever. That wide lens is going to give you the ability to film that up close stuff without kind of making you motion sick. So with the camera design, again, the whole premise behind Tactacam, it's built from the ground up for the hunter. So what you need in a lens design compared to other point of view cameras is the ability to mimic your human eye. So everything's real distance, and you got to get that real depth. Otherwise it makes the footage unusable, if it's past 10 feet. Yeah. So with the wide lens is optimized for about 30 feet. And it makes it nice because I can hold that camera and do a self interview if I'm doing something, just kind of hold it at arm's length, and it's going to look perfect. It's going to have me just the right distance from that camera. Obviously all the audio with the microphone ability, it just allows you to kind of have a second angle that you can do up close and personal stuff with. Maybe I'm setting trail cameras and I want to, film myself setting up my trail camera, setting up my mock scrape, whatever. I can do that. I can get a bunch of B-roll with it. So for my purpose, my favorite thing to do with it outside of fishing is actually have a selfie view. So if I've got, one camera, my regular lens camera mounted facing forward on my scope, on my muzzleloader, or on the, stabilizer slot on my bow, I can actually mount another one either facing backwards on the scope or backwards on my bow riser. And I can get I can get my whole facial expression and all that, because it's like, it pushes me enough away from that camera to just be the perfect distance. I can see most of my body plus my facial expression. I know we've got a couple really cool videos out there this last year of a guy took his daughter on her first muzzleloader deer hunt, and just watching her face light up every time that deer would do something before and after the shot, was just kind of priceless to have. But it gives you multiple angles is really the benefit for, if you're going to use multiple cameras, it gives you one angle that you can use for just about anything, and then your other angle that's optimized for the shot. Now fishing, like you said, I like it because it opens the picture up a little bit too. So you're seeing about 130 degrees versus about a 90 degrees out from that camera. And so when I'm kayak fishing again, if I've got a fish coming in on the opposite side that the camera's pointed on the head mount, I don't have to really crank around and really focus on where my head's pointed to make sure I'm getting that footage. It brings it up. It shows the whole front of the boat. I can see on both sides of the boat pretty well. There in Virginia, did a lot of offshore fishing with a couple buddies of mine. Again, it captures a lot more of the action. You can see just a lot more of that stuff in there. And it allows things that are more up close and personal, like fishing. When you're holding that fish up at an arm's length, you get to see the whole fish up in the picture versus maybe it looking like you're looking at the fish's head and body.
Gotcha. All right. So the wide lens is good for the close-up stuff. Am I hearing you right? All right. And then
the simplest way to put it. Yep. It's better for close-up stuff. Yep.
Okay. And then the 5.0 is good for the longer range zoom stuff.
Exactly. Yep.
Got it. Okay. Well, let's take a coffee break. And when we get back, we'll continue our conversation with Aaron Stonehocker from Tactacam.
I still can't believe that's all you're taking.
I got everything I need all in one bag.
Recology Deer Supplement and Attractant, developed through years of intense scientific research, comes a product that puts it all in one bag. Superior attractant, scientifically formulated vitamins and minerals, and all at a much better price. To get yours today, please check out Recology.org for a list of dealers. Recology, how can you afford not to use it? Everything deer need, all in one bag.
Hunter-friendly coffee retailers are great, but ever wonder where they buy it from? Now there's a company that imports directly from farmers, zero middlemen, roasts it, and ships it right to your door. From the farmer's fields to your morning cup, Hunter's Blend Coffee has been in the hands of hunters. Through their giving, your coffee supports the RMEF, Whitetails Unlimited, and Women's Hunting Associations, and many others. Now you can defend hunting one cup at a time. Not bad for a cup of coffee. And did I mention, it is so good. And now back to our conversation with Aaron Stonehocker of Tactacam. So you have one of these devices, and they're awesome, but they're not effective unless you have a place to put it, because you have to tend to your weapon, right?
Yeah.
So talk about some of the ground mount strategies. Like you said that I think Jeff had one on the ground, and then obviously you have other places that they need to go, whether it's on your weapon, and there are different types of weapons, obviously, that they need to accommodate, and maybe a head mount, and where would you put that mount, or how would you mount something that is of interview type quality, that close-up shot for a wide lens?
Yeah, definitely. So we've got We've got mounts for everything that you can probably think of for the hunter. So we've got our custom gun mount that'll allow you to mount to gun barrels. It'll allow you to mount to scope tubes, whatever, anything that's round. It's going to allow you to mount your camera to that, which is really cool. Then you've got your Tactacam bow stabilizer mount. This is actually made to replace a bow hunting stabilizer, but it doesn't have to. So on my competition bow, for example, I've got about a 12-inch octane stabilizer on that's got counterweights on the end. So I can do a couple things. The mount plus the stabilizer is about 7.5 ounces. So I can actually just pull my weights off, throw that in the end. Now my camera's sticking out, 12 to 14 inches in front of the bow, but it also kind of compensates for that weight that I just took off. Or it's a tubular shaped stabilizer. I can actually use my gun mount on that as well. But for the average Joe, it's just got a hunting stabilizer. That's what our stabilizer mount is made to do. It's made to pull that one off, slap it in there, and it mounts it right to the stabilizer slot on your bow. There's a couple custom mounting options that you've got. So our head mount actually comes with a universal adapter mount. You can buy it separately online as well. But that mount adapter allows you to mount Tactacam to pretty much any other third-party mount that's out there. When GoPro started, the point of view, popular stuff, they made mounts for quite a few things, and then companies came in after them and made mounts for everything. So with that universal adapter, all those mounts use the same base system. So really there's a mount out there for any application you could want now that you've got that adapter for it. We do have a head mount. Like I said, that universal adapter comes with that if you buy that as a package. So it's a basic head strap. It's got one strap that goes around your head, another strap that goes over the top for stability, and then you've got a complete 360 degrees of adjustment, when you can rotate the mount to whatever angle you want. And then you've also got the tilt in and out to about 180 degrees for slow on that camera. So really, and this is where the Wi-Fi kind of helps out with that as well, because there are states, Montana being one of them actually, that during an archery only season, it is actually illegal to mount electronic pieces of equipment to your bow, no matter what it is, even if it's just a camera.
Really?
So yeah. And so, well, I think the way I read it is that once you attach any kind of electronic piece of equipment to it, other than a lighted knock, which just got passed this last year, I guess, that you can use lighted knocks, the bow becomes something other than archery equipment. So if it's gun season, the way I read it, I think you can have it mounted to your bow if you want to hunt with a bow during gun season, but obviously you got to abide by the gun season laws there as well. But yeah, so there are states like that. I know Oregon was one that just got it passed this year. One of our Tactacam team members, actually, really cool side note, Riley Miller is her name, give her a shout out. She met with some of those decision makers this last year quite a few times, and they just switched it to where you can have a camera mounted on your bow up in that state. So really, really cool opportunities kind of happening now that there are more places and cameras are getting more popular for people sharing their hunt. But yeah, the head mount anyway, getting back to the mounts, it's completely 360 degree adjustable with the Wi-Fi, which is what I love the most about having that head mount. Is when I'm fishing, that's always what I have on. And now when I'm archery hunting, I'm gonna have to figure this out as well. I can hook it up to my phone and I can see exactly when it's live streaming to my phone where that camera's pointed, so I can make sure it's adjusted perfectly for capturing the angle I'm trying to capture.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then you've got our crossbow. For crossbow hunters, depending on what kind of scope you have, a lot of them are getting really compact. So you're losing that scope tube space that you normally have been able to mount your gun mount to. Now we made an under scope rail mount that'll mount to Picatinny rail systems for under scopes. So it kind of kicks the camera up and off to the side of your scope, but it mounts underneath the scope on the same rail your scope's on. Then we've got our normal Picatinny rail mount, which will mount, and either one of those will mount to any Picatinny rail system you've got. So you got an AR, you got a pistol, it's got the Picatinny rail underneath the barrel there. You can do all kinds of things with it. So really, if you've got a weapon, we've got a way to mount it to it. And then if you are trying to, like you said, for that wide angle, if I'm trying to film a self interview or something, I've got a tripod here with a camera arm on it. And I can actually just get my universal mount out, and I've got a little, I bought one of those 30 packs for like $15 on Amazon of just the random mount bases. And now I just kind of use whatever I can with that universal adapter to mount my wide lens to it. So if I'm trying to film like a little interview, put it on a tripod. If I'm doing it on my bow, I've actually got a custom mount that I mounted to my riser with that universal mount that's got the camera pointed back at me, all kinds of stuff. So yeah, there's definitely a way to mount your camera for any application you have. Okay. All right. And what about your ground mounts? How would you do that? So it just kind of depends on what you're trying to do. I know those, they got those flexible leg tripods that are, I think they stand at full height, about 7 inches off the ground.
Yep.
A lot of guys do those. I know we've got some really cool turkey footage of guys having cameras out on like right next to decoys, or waterfowl footage where guys have them out in the decoy spread facing up, where they just throw a wide lens on it, so you don't have to worry about it being all that up close, or if it's pointed up, you're capturing more of the sky. And then they'll be filming off their gun barrel from a blind or whatever, shooting the geese and ducks, or shooting the turkey, but the turkey is right up on top of a camera and doesn't even know it. So those flexible tripods are a pretty cool option. They give you a pretty universal function when you're trying to mount it on the ground, or maybe there's a tree branch that's lower than you that you want to mount it to, that kind of thing. That's probably the most popular one.
Gotcha. And how would you mount it to that? Is there an adapter or something that would make it attached to it itself? Yeah,
exactly. So the tripod, almost every single tripod mount they're typically universal. It's got a thread on it that you just would screw a mount into, or you screw the base of a camera into.
Yep.
So what you do there is, like I said, in that little 30 pack of mounts I've got one that is that standard thread size. It's a tripod mount is what it is. And so I would just thread that base on there, and it's got those 2 prongs sticking up. So then I take my universal adapter mount off my head mount, and I stick it on there, and then I've just got my camera mounted to my tripod.
Gotcha. Okay. And let's say you had like a regular tripod. Does that stabilizer mount that you have, it has a thumb screw at the bottom to hold it in place?
Yeah.
Is the thread count and design of that thumb screw the equivalent to what you would find on a standard tripod type structure?
No, that's actually going to be a little bit smaller, but I love that idea. Actually, that's pretty brilliant, because then you could just have your stabilizer mount as your tripod mount, or that would be really cool. Plus, it's keeping the camera completely upright. So
right.
No, that thumb screw down there. Now you mentioned that. So yeah, it's to hold the camera in the stabilizer mount. It does have that thumb screw on the bottom. So you just snug it up when the camera's in there, loosen it up to slide the camera out. Right. But yeah, no, it's that would be cool, but no, it's too small.
Gotcha. All right. So that's not the same fit as you'd find on a standard screw. And I don't know what the fitting size is. Like there's a number that's associated with it. I don't know what it is, but yes.
Yeah, I can't remember either.
Yeah. But I actually have
one kind of.
I have the device that makes that. Like you can get a piece of metal and you can hone out your exact screw fitting that fits most game cameras and other tripod accessories.
Yeah.
I could see how just a simple change in the stabilizer mount would be huge, because then you wouldn't have to that screw mount itself would become your thumb screw.
Yeah, definitely. That'd be a pretty cool option, as long as you had a screw to throw back in there if you wanted to use that same stabilizer on your bow. I know we do have guys that'll mount them inside of race cars for like dirt track racing and stuff.
Yep.
And one of the companies that we've been working with on some of that stuff, they actually take that stabilizer mount just because of its rigidity.
Mm-hmm.
They drill a hole through their roll cage, and they put the bolt on the back end of that stabilizer through it, and put a bolt or a nut on the end of that, and that's actually the mount they use for kind of pointing down inside the car, which is kind of cool.
Gotcha. And so the screw end of the stabilizer mount, where you'd screw it into your bow, that part could, if you could hone out or create the hole that would fit the thread, you could technically screw that into any place, as long as you could get it to fit what the standard bow mounting is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. Very cool. What other accessories do you feel are important to go along with some of these things?
So the one thing that the camera is not going to come with to film right out of the box is going to be an SD card. So that's probably, for people who aren't super familiar with cameras, your SD card is the brain of that camera. So when you get an SD card, you want to make sure it's the highest quality SD card you can get. You're probably going to want to make sure it's the highest capacity that your camera can take. And what those two things are going to do is allow that camera to run smoothly and store the maximum amount of footage on that card before it fills up. So this really comes into play with the 4.0 and the 5.0, because they both have higher resolution options, which takes a little bit more for that camera to write. And so that card needs to be able to write pretty darn fast so it doesn't jam the camera up, because it's trying to shove information into a little file. And if it can't do that fast enough, it can back the camera up. So that's probably the biggest thing our customer service line probably handles is SD card questions, or, some of the experiences that a person might be having with their camera is being caused because of the SD card they have in the camera. You swap it out with a higher quality one, the camera goes back to working fine. So on your Tactacam Solo with a 1080p resolution, built-in 3x zoom, just about any SD card that's out there, as long as it's rated for a class 10, is going to be fine for you. I believe those ones will take from 8 up to a 32 gigabyte card. Your 4.0s are going to take anywhere from an 8 gigabyte up to a 64 gigabyte card. I run 32s in mine. But again, you're going to want to make sure that it's running a class 10 from the quality standard, because that allows that 2.7K footage to write cleanly. You can go a little bit better and get like what's called an Ultra 1 or an Ultra 3 quality. So class 10, just a side note on that, it's going to be, if you're looking at an SD card in the package and it's rated for class 10, it'll either say class 10 on the package, or it's going to have a symbol there, which is the letter C with a 10 inside of the C. That'll be your class 10 symbol. And then an Ultra 1 or an Ultra 3 is going to be the letter U with a 1 or a 3 inside of it. So just those are the two things people are going to want to look for. When you get into the 5.0s, you're definitely going to want an Ultra 3 card. Again, that's just that write speed with the 4K. The file size of a 4K video can get pretty darn big. And even if you're filming it, it doesn't mean that your computer is going to want to accept it when you open it up. On your computer, if your computer can't read that file size, or your phone, same thing. So there's a bunch of different factors. The more resolution you have, the larger the file size. That's where these other factors kind of start to come to play. So SD card is your biggest accessory. It's going to make sure your camera's running smoothly. 5.0, definitely get yourself at least a 64 gigabyte card that's rated an Ultra 3. It'll take up to 128. 4.0, definitely make sure it's a class 10. Better is the Ultra series of cards, but make sure it's a 32 or bigger, I would say. And then your Solo, you're going to have no problem from an 8 to a 32 gigabyte card with a class 10 on that. But you're depending on how much you're going to store on there is where the other stuff gets into. So, if you got an 8 gigabyte card, it's going to fill up pretty quick. You're going to get maybe an hour and a half, maybe longer, depending on what you're filming on that, but not much more, which might sound like a lot, but you get a few 10-minute clips on there too. It'll start to bog the camera down. So definitely go with a higher capacity card, higher class card to make sure your camera's running right.
Gotcha. Okay. So, and that's super important. It sounds like this is something that you do not want to overlook, because the higher resolution cameras are taking up more bandwidth, basically, and with the cards, and you're going to have a certain kind of card. Are they all micro SDs, or are they just standard SDs?
Yeah, they're all micro SDs, and we actually sell them on the website too, just to kind of it's as a convenience factor, I guess. Just so people know they're getting the right style card for their camera. We sell the 64 gigabyte class 10 cards on there. They run great. That's actually what I'm running right now. But yeah, just the higher quality of the card you put in there, the better it's going to run. It's like your computer. It's the hard drive for that system, because the camera is essentially a tiny computer.
Gotcha. So if you're really looking to get super sharp images and do some really high-end videography with the Tactacam, then you're going to need some of these more heavy-duty SD cards. But if you're doing the Solo or the 4.0, you may not need to go as big if you're just trying to capture moments for yourself.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. That's good to know. That's some big details there. Very good.
Like I said, that's probably the most common thing that we get, especially with these 5.0s, and that's something we're kind of expecting. The more tech stuff you cram into something, the more potential or perceived issues, I guess, people might start to have with it, because that window for user error comes in and it gets a little bit bigger. But the SD card is, I can already tell you from the 5.0s that are out there, people are calling with different issues, or thinking their cameras are having issues, and it's the SD card. So don't cheap out on an SD card. It's the most important part of that camera.
Okay. Very good advice. Now, as far as the warranty, now, and this is always a big thing with me when I buy anything that is electronic, what's the warranty policy?
Yeah, so all of our cameras come with a 1-year warranty on them. That covers your mounts, that covers your camera, anything you bought from Tactacam that covers. So, if you're out there and your back cap cracks, or you might be having issues with your camera, that the customer service determines, hey, go ahead and send it in, we'll take a look at it. They'll cover that. Pretty much anything on that camera, head to toe, it's covered for at least 1 year. And then we do have an extended warranty you can buy after that as well. I've never seen personal experience before I worked for Tactacam, or even now, I've never seen customer service not usually cover something as long as it's pretty well within that 1 year window on the first run. If you buy the extended warranty, it's a 2 year warranty, I think, for $60. But you're making a $500, close to $500 investment on your 5.0, or even that $200 investment on your Solo. You want to make sure it's covered. So we've definitely got you covered. And in the camera, I've got my 2.0 still that I've had now for 4 years, and it still runs and kicks and everything. And I've put that thing through hell. So they're covered and they're rugged. So you don't really have to worry too much. But if you had an issue, we've got you covered.
All right. So speaking of price points between the Solo 4.0, 5.0s, what should we expect?
Yeah, so the Solos start out, the standard Solo starts out there at $199, which is kind of the same price point our 2.0s were. And then you jump up to $329.99 for the Tactacam 4.0. And then the 5.0, our latest version is $429.99. So it jumps about $100 in between each one.
Gotcha. All right, very good. I think that's a pretty good overview of what the Tactacam is today, and what is available at the highest level for anybody listening. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
I mean, just if you're looking for a way to film your hunt, or you're just getting started, and even now, you can pretty much film anything you need to film with a Tactacam, which makes it really cool. One of my favorite part about it, I guess, coming from myself as a guy I've filmed with the camera arms up in the tree, and a DSLR camera and a regular Panasonic camcorder. I've done quite a bit of that stuff too. Being able to leave an extra 20 pounds of gear at home and take 6 ounces up in the tree with me, it's night and day. That's my favorite part about just the capabilities of this camera are endless, because you open up so many more doors. You're going up with less weight. Now that I'm out here hiking around in the mountains, I can tell you I don't want to drag around a big camera. Right. First off, I don't know the opportunities that are going to present themselves and when. So having something that's a push of a button is super important for me. It's got all the audio I'm going to need. It's got the 2 angles I want. And like I said, I'm bringing less than a pound of gear up there with me. So even if I had 5 cameras, I'm still under a pound. So pretty solid that way.
That is
super simple. It's weatherproof.
Yep.
Everything.
That's a super feature, and it's not something that should be overlooked. Is that if you're going for a decent walk, either to your tree stand, or if you're a ground hunter like I am, especially when there's snow and we're doing tracking. It means a huge difference between how little you pack in just your essentials, and the weight can mean a big difference.
Absolutely. Yep. And then being able to bring that memory home with you is that much cooler.
Right. Absolutely. So one last question, and this is for our northern folk.
Yeah.
How sensitive are the batteries and the functionality of these things to cold weather?
To cold weather, any electronic, you're going to lose some battery life when it comes to cold weather. Now, depending on the situation, it could be worse than others. I've been out personally. Well, I've been out with my Panasonic camcorder, and I had to switch batteries 3 times on a 4-hour hunt. And that was, I think it was about 10 degrees outside. This last year in Virginia, I think we had it down to, it was 5 degrees one morning. I was hunting with my 4.0, and we had 4 or 5 ducks we ended up shooting at, and I got all 5 of those on camera, and we were out there for about 3.5, 4 hours as well. I got down, it drained about a half a battery, but it didn't burn up the whole battery, which was nice. And then I've been out there in -2 degrees on another duck hunt out there in Virginia. And again, we actually didn't end up seeing anything that day, but we had, birds work us, and the camera would come on. So I had probably 5-10 clips over another half-day period where the morning was -2, and I think it only got up to about 10 degrees. So I was able to capture some footage there, not shooting at anything, but the cameras definitely come on and respond. So, and again, coming back to that SD card, the higher quality your SD card, the better it's going to be able to write in cold weather, because everything slows down on electronic when it's cold, everything. So when it's filming and trying to write, you want that high quality, high speed SD card to be able to write even better in cold weather too. So that you'd be surprised how many things can seem like an issue when it's actually just one piece of the equipment. So
gotcha.
SD card.
Gotcha. Okay. So where's the future of Tactacam going? I mean, I know you said you can't really tell us all the little details, but about the future and some products that might be coming out. Can you give us a hint on something? Give us something.
I can give you some hints. Yeah. I'll see. Maybe I'll get chastised for it later. But no, we the nearest future. Well, the coolest thing with 5.0. I'll start here. The 5.0 with the software ability that's in it, and just like the quote unquote computer that's inside of 5.0, it's got some pretty outstanding capabilities. So it's gonna, for guys who might be worried about, punching the bullet on this investment of a camera that's $429.99, and thinking, oh man, I bet next year, like Apple or iPhone or whatever, they're going to come out with a new one. That's not going to be the case. So guys that may be worried about that, the cameras we've got out now, the Solo, the 4.0, and the 5.0, they're not going anywhere anytime soon. All three cameras, I would recommend any one of those cameras to anybody that's just trying to film their hunt, based on the situation is where I might recommend the upgrade. But with this 5.0, things are going to get pretty darn cool, over the course of the next couple of years here, as we're able to do more stuff with the camera and put more rollouts to the customers, things like that. I really am excited about the opportunities that are there and kind of the ability to expand the camera we have versus coming out with a new camera to expand on its capabilities is pretty neat. I will say that we've got something else that's coming here probably this next year or so. That is going to open the doors wide open to every single type of hunter out there. I know, guys listening that, maybe they're rifle hunters out in Wyoming that antelope hunt, and the closest shot they're going to take is 200 yards. Maybe they're concerned about the distance this camera can film. There's going to be a lot of cool things that are going to open a lot of doors for that type of stuff. We've done a lot of research. We've got a lot of guys in our Tactacam team program. We've got a lot of guys that, utilize them for fishing, especially with this wide lens. So I would be looking for some pretty cool fishing stuff to start rolling out here pretty soon. That maybe opens some more doors for fishermen. Just being able to kind of widen that perspective. And then the 5.0 now, one of the features we didn't touch on is it's actually got a red dot mode that you can put it into. So you go into your camera, open it up on the app in your settings, and you can turn on a red dot. And what that does is when you go back and replay the footage, the camera in the center of the screen's actually got a little red dot, just like what you probably imagine. And what that allows you to do when you're maybe you're out sport clay shooting, or maybe you're waterfowl hunting and you're missing birds all day and you're like, what am I doing wrong? If you have that red dot feature on, you go replay that footage, it will show you a reference point of where your gun was pointed in relation to the target, which is kind of neat. So shooting sports is another thing we're starting to try to target a little bit more. Especially a lot of our conservation partners like Pheasants Forever do a ton of stuff with youth shooting organizations and trap shooting, stuff in the high school level. So we're really looking to maybe get into some stuff there too.
Gotcha. Have you ever thought about exploring some of the night hunting for coyotes and hogs and that kind of thing, where you can the infrared sensitivity or the heat sensing type stuff?
Yeah, I mean that's a huge question. We get that a lot actually. How do you guys, are you ever going to come out with a night vision one? The possibility is there. I'll say that. I don't know. I don't know what capabilities, I guess, the guys, in development, Ben and those guys are looking into making the camera do. But I will say that with technology nowadays, it wouldn't be a difficult task to make that available. Yeah. I do know they've got there, that's the thing with the outdoors industry. I think it's kind of like the military. For every product you see on the shelf somewhere, there's 10 other ones that are improving on that in the works. So the constant improvement, constant development with features like that, I don't think they're definitely not out of the question, but I don't know if there's a timeline on that yet.
Gotcha. Okay. Very good. Aaron, let's move on to a deer hunting story. I know that I asked you to think of a good one that might be very memorable to you in the beginning.
Yeah.
So let's tell us a good deer hunting story.
All right. Well, I wanted to tailor this one kind of to the topic today. So, as I told you, I've got that Lights for Outdoor stuff. It's a website now, so I'm trying always to get videos put together for it. But in the infancy of that, when I first started getting my camera gear, I was, you're always out there, you're trying to make it work. But when you bring, and you listen to anybody that videos their hunts, when you bring a camera, not so much with Tactacam, but when you bring a camera arm and a full-blown camera into the tree with you, or a cameraman, hunting gets twice as hard. There's a lot of things that got to fall into place just right. You've got to do everything just right. You've got 3 times more, stuff out there that you're actually trying to worry about, make happen and all that. So the first time I videoed several deer hunts, but I wouldn't say I ever videoed one until this time. So I'm going out there. It's Thanksgiving morning. It was like 5 degrees, I think, when I woke up. And it was one of those days you walk outside and you're like, man, I might just stay home. You know, the family's coming over at noon. Maybe I won't go. But I ended up putting on every piece of hunting gear I had. And I figured, oh, if I'm not warm in this, I'll go sit for at least an hour. And if I can't do that, then I'll end up coming home. So I packed the camera arm. I packed my big old Panasonic camcorder out there and get everything up there. Go to one of my just honey hole stands that, you know, worst case scenario, you're going to see a doe walk by. And I'm sitting up there, got the camera going. I filmed a little interview when the sun came up and all that. And this was an off day, and I didn't know if it was because it was cold or what, but the deer were not moving. I hadn't seen anything. It was working on 10 o'clock in the morning, and I'm starting to get cold. You know, I'm like, okay, my feet are getting cold. And once your feet are cold, it's over. So I'm standing up in the stand, and all of a sudden, it's out of nowhere. I literally was getting ready to pack that camera off the camera arm and start getting all that gear back in my pack. And here comes a doe walking over the ridge. And so I was like, you know what? Let's go ahead and try it. So I turned the camera on, and I'd already swapped batteries, I think twice at this point. I turned the camera on, and I look at the battery indicator on the screen, and it's already flashing like low battery for my third battery. Right. And I'm like, well, if she comes in quick, I'll get her. If not, you know, no big deal. But she ends up coming over the ridge just perfect. She stops right at my 20-yard tree it's my 20-yard marker tree for that direction. Yep. She stops right behind it, and I'm at full draw with my bow, and I look up, I glance up at the camera screen. She's dead center of the shot. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to happen. I pull the trigger. I smoke her, just perfect shot. She kicks, she runs off, and she dies on camera, everything. And I'm like, wow, holy smokes. Like, this couldn't have worked out any better. I was so pumped. That was the first time I'd ever got a deer on video. And I'm like, okay, this is, you know, now I'm excited. I actually made it happen. And so I flipped that camera around, and I'm doing a little excited interview and stuff. And then I flipped the screen over so I could see myself to make sure I was centered. And I noticed there was no red dot up in the corner of the screen. I'm like, that's weird. And so I hit the record button, and, you know, thinking I'm pausing the camera, and I turn it back around, and I look, and the light's flashing now. And I flipped the camera back around to myself, and I'm like, did I not get any of that? And sure enough, when I get home and watch the video, the only thing I captured was me saying, did I not get any of that? Oh, and man. So I could not believe it. I was like, oh my gosh, the first time everything just worked perfect, you know? Right. And I was freezing and everything. So anyway, I go take care of the deer, and I'm a little bummed, but oh well, I got some meat for the freezer. And it's a funny story, if nothing else. So pack everything back home. And I didn't have a successful deer on video. So then now we're going to go to another hunting story. So this last, when I moved to Virginia, I was still an Iowa resident at the time. So I actually came back, and I got to come home to hunt. So my uncle's funeral and my brother-in-law's wedding were happening back-to-back weekends. And so we took a week of vacation for that week in between. And I'm like, man, it's October. I'm not going to go back and not bow hunt, you know? So I bring my bow with me, and we get out there to the stand. And this was the first time that I had with a bow in my hand with my Tactacam on a hunt. And same thing. I just bought my NE6 tag. I said, I don't care what it is. You know, I'm putting meat in the freezer. I'm taking meat back home to Virginia because I still hadn't got a chance to deer hunt out there at that time. And we get out there to the stand and doing a little interview stuff. This time I have a little bit different camera to save some weight. I bought a small DSLR. And I've got that up there in the stand with me, and everything's kind of looking good. There's some, you know, bucks fighting behind me that didn't end up working out, but I go back out that evening, and there's a whole herd of does that just come charging in. It was really cool. So I got this all on film with my DSLR, and I had my bow hanging there. And I'm like, if they're coming running that hard, there's got to be a buck chasing them. So I'm waiting, and these deer are just acting funky. And I mean, I've never seen does act almost like they've got a really bad case of ADD. Like they run one direction and stop. Yeah. And they sniff and they mill around, and then all of a sudden they're sprinting over here, sprinting over there. I'm like, dude, something's up. Like, something's coming. And so I'm getting ready. I got my bow ready. And all the deer, they take off and they jump off the edge of this creek down into a creek bottom. They splash around in there, and they go run up the other side. And I'm like, where is this buck? Like, he's got to be chasing them through here. Yep. Well, then I'm watching this. There's a cedar sapling that I just happened to start seeing it move. And I look over there, and there's a buck just thrashing it. I can't see him. He's on the opposite side of the tree, but he is just tearing this tree up. Yeah. And then I get excited. So I get the camera on that, and I get my Tactacam on and ready, and I'm grunting at him, and I'm snort wheezing at him. I'm trying to get him to do something. He just will not work. He's focused on this tree. Well, the buck ends up staying on the opposite side of the creek, which isn't normal for that area. He works his way all the way around me about 80 yards, and I don't know if he caught my wind or what, but he just beat feet, got out of there. So I'm like, okay, this hunt's over, you know? And so I turned around. Well, there's a doe with two, they look like yearlings with her, and she was about 50 yards from me. And so I've got a butt call that's got like the bleat and everything on it. I bleat at her, and just out of pure curiosity to see what she would do. And she like locked onto my tree, and she came sprinting from 50 yards over a creek all the way up to the base of my tree, like in 2 seconds. And I don't know if she was the lead doe and she wanted to pound whatever I was or what. But so at this point, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to get a doe. So she works her way around this brush. I have no shot opportunities. I get the main camera on her, and I've got my Tactacam still running. And she kind of works out, and I've got one arm on the camera arm, and I'm working it. All of a sudden she looks up and just nails me. I'm like, oh crap. Like, picture perfect scenario, you know, she's right there in frame, and I've got the camera on her and everything. And she locked onto me moving up there. So I froze, and she started kind of doing her head bob thing. And I thought she was going to blow me, and she ended up looking away to see what the other two does are doing. At that point, I'm like, screw the big camera. I've got the Tactacam. We're going to make this happen. So I get my release on the bow. I've got the Tactacam pointed at her, and she looks back up at me, and then she looks down for a split second and kind of walks behind this tree. So I go to full draw. She comes out. I level her at 10 yards, and I put a perfect shot on her. She takes off running, and just out of dumb luck, I kept the Tactacam on her. That I was so excited because I thought, okay, now I officially got my first deer on Tactacam or on camera, period. You know, and while I'm squatting down, like looking to the trees and stuff, my bow just happened to follow the direction she was going and stayed on her the whole time. So I got to watch her fall over on the camera and get back home. And it was the reason, I think, that if you're going to be filming at all and you want to get that shot on camera, for if you're hunting a TV show or you're just an average guy looking to get your hunts on film, that right there sealed the deal with me of why Tactacam is such a cool and important tool if you're trying to film your hunt. Is she would not let me use that big camera. I would have not been able to harvest a deer that whole trip if I was only relying on that camera, trying to get it on camera. But with my Tactacam, I was able to just leave it on her and smoke her and put some deer in the cooler and take it back to Virginia. So just a cool testament, I guess, to why it was important I had a Tactacam on.
Right. I agree. I think the size of a Tactacam and the hands-free capacity, if you still want to capture that video, it's crucial.
Yeah. No, I figured those stories would fit. I know you're probably used to the Big Buck Registry, Big Buck stories, but both of those didn't have horns. But I do have my biggest buck today. If you got time for one more, I can do it.
Sure, let's do it.
I might as well write for the Big Buck Registry this time. So
yeah,
anyway,
let's get a big buck story in there too.
So this was way before Tactacam. This is actually the second deer I ever harvested with my bow. My grandpa had just passed away from cancer that week. And so I kind of went out there and, I told myself, you know what, if nothing else, I'm going to spend some time out here in the woods and just kind of remember Grandpa and think of him that way. And you kind of just got that sense. You just felt like, he was kind of out there with me in the stand that morning. And it was a beautiful morning. The sunrise was beautiful sitting in my stand. And, I really I don't think I was focused on the hunt so much as just actually taking some time to really enjoy just being out there in the middle of nowhere, quiet to myself, kind of remembering some things. And about the time I could start to see my pins, I started hearing movement off to my left. And so I look over and I can see the back of a deer kind of moving through some gooseberry bushes over there. And so I'm like, okay. So I ease up in the stand and I get my release on my bow and I put my grunt call in my mouth and I just let out one little grunt. And it was a doe. She picked her head up and she's looking around and she puts her head back down and keeps on feeding through there. And I'm like, okay, that was kind of cool. But this early, it was November, it was rut time. I'm thinking, okay, there's probably a buck with her, or there will be soon. And sure enough, I just took a look a little bit farther around my shoulder and I can see another back. This one's about twice as tall as she was with its head down, and it was just trailing her perfect. And so I grunted again. And I just see this rat come up out of the gooseberry bushes. And it was a little too dark to really tell exactly what he was because the sun wasn't filtering through where he was at yet. But I just knew he was big. He was wide. I'm like, okay, like that's a monster deer. And so he kind of puts his head back down and he starts trailing her again. And I grunt again. And he picks his head up and he looks. And he can't really figure it out. And he blows once, kind of snort wheezes. And then he kind of shakes his head and puts his head back down and starts trailing that doe again. And then this time the doe she wasn't even focused on us. And so every time he'd put his head down, he did it about 3 or 4 more times, I would grunt. And finally he had enough. He got right in the sunlight. It was just the perfect backlighting. He gets up there and you could just see his neck get all fat and swollen and the hair standing up on his back and on his neck. And he just starts posturing like he's going to come kick something's butt.
Wow.
This was his doe and this was his area. And I'd never seen this deer before. And on one side at that point, I could tell there was something kind of funky with one side of his rack, but I was so focused on not moving because he'd pinned me down in the tree every time. Like he knew that's where it was coming from, but I don't think it was light enough. He could really see me in the tree yet. And so he starts circling around in the tree and he gets to where I'm pretty sure, being an inexperienced bow hunter at this point, I didn't even have a rangefinder. So every time I would just always try to estimate, trees and different yardages. And so I'd estimated he was about 15 yards based off where he was in relation to this fence post that was out in the middle of the woods. And so I keep waiting for him to give me an opportunity to draw. And finally he kind of had enough because I quit calling. And I think he just like, okay, that buck must have left just based off what I did. So he looks back over his shoulder for that doe. And when he did, I came to full draw and he looked right back at me. And I let the arrow fly and I heard the loudest crack I've ever heard, taking a shot. So I thought, and he didn't move. He stood there. He just stood there and he kind of looked around for a second and he looked back at the doe and he looked back at me and looked back at the doe. And then he just put his head down to the ground and he walked off right after that doe. And I was like, man, I hit a tree. Like there's no way I thought I just missed and I couldn't believe it. The biggest deer I've ever seen in my life. So I'm sitting up there in the stand. The adrenaline kind of wears off finally and that deer and the doe walk off and they're gone for a while. And it turned into the best morning of hunting of my life. I mean, there was bucks everywhere, big deer, broken deer. I mean, just ridiculous. None of the bucks were coming into range, but I wasn't sure about that shot. If I'd hit him, I didn't know. I'm not going to take a shot at a buck now because I don't know if I just shot one. And, so all these bucks were working, right under my tree. It was crazy. Like I've never seen rut action like that. And a doe finally comes through the area. So the doe that had come through obviously was the hot one, but another one came in. She stopped 15 yards perfect to my left. I'm like, I've got a doe tag. I'll fill the freezer, that way I can at least bring home some deer. And I shoot at her and I miss right over her back and she stands there. And so I load another arrow. She lets me do that. And I draw and I shoot right under her belly. I've got one arrow left. I'm like, well, I got nothing to lose. I shoot for whatever reason, 15 yards, shot right over her back again. And she finally had enough. She took off. So now I'm up there. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. I have no arrows left and there's still bucks moving. They're all over the place. I'm like, this is crazy. So I wait about another half hour. I'm like, I can't not spook a deer. I've just got to get down. I have no arrows. I need to go see, where my other arrow hit, find it in the tree or whatever. So I get down. And I'm over there 15 yards from my stand looking for my 3 arrows. I find 2 of them and I'm looking. I cannot find this third arrow. And I bend over to move some brush and I found the arrow. I pick it up. And as I look up, there's a buck. He was missing one eye and he had, I think 3 or 4 times busted on one side and 2 or 3 busted on the other. Like he had been fighting the heck out of some stuff. And he's eye to eye with me at like 3 feet, just staring at me, like stopped on the trail wondering, what are you doing? And I'm like, this is it. Like, this is where I die right here. These are the stories that you hear about. I had doe pee on my boots and everything. I'm like, oh, great. Like, here we go.
Right.
And I got so nervous. I started shaking and he kind of looked at me and started tilting his head side to side, trying to figure out what I was. And he finally blew and I could feel his breath on my face. He blew and took off running. I'm like, wow, holy smokes. Like this, I'm never going to experience a better day. Like, and I missed the deer, but whatever. Like, that's so cool. So I go back up to my stand. And I climb back up now that I got 3 arrows. I'm like, you know what? I'll wait here for another 20 minutes. It's just too good of a day. I'm not going to go home yet. And I get up there and I get all situated again. And I start seeing a doe coming down the trail towards me. And all the action kind of thus far hadn't been, typically the deer travel the opposite direction on that trail. But this doe was coming back down this direction or towards me, like head on. So I start watching her. Well, behind her, I can see a pretty big body, but I can't make out what it is. I just know it's a big deer. I'm like, okay, a buck's following her too. I'll just wait here and let them walk on by and we'll be done for the day. And she ends up coming right down the trail. And as she gets to the point where, the trail kind of turns and comes directly at me, there's about 25, 30 yards. The other deer that was behind her walked off the trail to the left and went behind some bushes and never saw it. Well, that's when I knew it was a buck because there was a dried up creek bed and they always drop down in there to travel through that area. Yep. And they usually end up, if they do that, they pop up behind the stand where you can't shoot them. And so she walked right underneath my stand, perfect. And then I never saw him come out. So I'm like, okay, he dropped down that creek bottom, disappeared. So I gave him about another 15 minutes, didn't see him. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going home. So I get down and I walk over to where the buck was standing that morning when I went to shoot him. I don't see any hair. I don't see any blood, and I can't find my arrow. Like, my arrow's nowhere. And I look in all the trees in that area. I look at the ground. I'm not finding. I'm like, dude, I don't know what I hit, but that arrow either went sailing some other direction or what. So finally I give up looking for it, and I go hop back on the deer trail and I start walking out. And right where I saw that deer step off the trail back behind a bush laid the biggest buck I've ever seen in my life. He weighed well over 300 pounds.
Wow.
And he ended up scoring a 145, and he's got a 7-inch drop tine on one side. He's I've got pretty broad shoulders, I like to think, but I don't remember what his inside spread is, but I can actually take my shoulders and put them in his rack and move the rack around. And, he's that wide. It's just a pig of a deer.
Yeah.
And I just started crying like instantly, because I was like, man, like, Grandpa was here this day. Like, come on. Like, there's no way that, and I've never had a day of hunting that was ever the same. And, but anyway, yeah, that was so what had happened was I'd hit him in the shoulder, but my arrow, when I started gutting him and stuff, my arrow had penetrated the broadhead, and I think I probably had 3 inches of shaft that had gone into the deer, and I only got one lung. And what he had done, in the course of 3 hours, that doe took him wherever they went and actually brought him back around to die 30 yards from my tree stand.
Wow.
I would have never known I even hit him. There was no blood trail. There was no nothing. It was just, I was convinced I'd missed that deer.
Right.
And if that doe wouldn't have come back, and for whatever reason it took him that long to expire, he made it all the way back to the tree stand before he died. And it was actually the taxidermist that I had him at end up kind of messing up some stuff. And so I've had this rack forever, just it never got mounted. And I've always been hard on myself. Like, I've got to kill a deer that was that big and had that same coloration to put that rack on it. Just one of those things. The story's too good to settle for something that's not him, and I never have. And then we moved to Virginia, of course, and there's never going to be a deer big enough in Virginia to
right.
put that rack on, So I actually, Ben Stern, a buddy of his, does taxidermy, and I didn't know they did it. They do where he buys taxidermy and he sells the horns and stuff. So what he does, if he's got a mount that's in really good shape, he'll keep them out. And if someone has a rack they want to get mounted, you know what you're getting right away when you're looking at the deer. You're not going to have to guess. And he just puts the rack on it for you. So I actually just sent that rack back 2 days ago to Ben to give to his buddy to put on a deer that I picked off his wall. That's darn near good enough to put it on. But I figured I've waited long enough. It's been, right. I'm 28 now, and I shot that deer when I was 14. So 14 years, I've let that rack just sit there, and now I figured it's time to put them up, get to Montana, and we'll put them on the wall now. So,
what a great story! Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Just amazing. What a great story.
Heck of a hunt.
Very cool. Well, let me hit you with 10 rapid fire questions here.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, what's your number one hunting tip of all time?
Number one hunting tip. I think people are better when they first start hunting than they are when they feel like they're good at it. So the reason I say that is I think everything that happened in that hunt I just talked about, I think I was 3 times the hunter I was then, because I was so picky about being still, moving slow. I wouldn't even dream of picking up a cell phone in the tree stand, because you're always looking, you're always alert. And then nowadays you get so relaxed with it. So I think staying, number one tip, if I had to try to make that short, I think always be alert, always pay attention, because you never know what's going to happen.
Gotcha.
And that doesn't ever go away, no matter how much you think you know about the area.
Gotcha. We all have it. I think I know the answer to this question. We all have these things that it drives us crazy if we leave it in the truck or at home, and we're out in the field, and if we don't have it, we just feel naked. What's that one thing for you?
Because it's happened a few times, I'd actually say my release, which sounds dumb. I mean, obviously you're naked when you're a bow hunter, but I've actually done that. Yep. 3 times, I think, in my hunting career. Yep. If I had to say now for working for Tactacam, it's if you leave the Tactacam at home, or you accidentally leave your battery, or you take your SD card out and you forgot about it, that sucks too.
Yeah, that does. What's your biggest pet peeve in life?
Biggest pet peeve in life? Oh man, bad leadership.
That's a good one. That's a very good one. We have not had that answer yet before. That's a good one. Well,
I'm a big guy on leadership. So.
There you go. Okay, excellent. All right, you're 28 today. What would you tell the 16-year-old Aaron Stonehocker, knowing what you know today about life?
Oh man, probably just if you ever feel driven to do something, do it, and don't ever stop doing it. Don't put things on the side table, I guess, for later.
Nice.
Do them now.
Okay.
And keep driving at it.
All right. You're at a hunting convention somewhere in the world, and a stranger comes up to you and asks you what you do for a living. What do you tell them?
I would say I work for Tactacam. It's the world's greatest hunting camera.
Nice. What did you have for breakfast this morning?
Holy smokes, I haven't had breakfast yet.
Wow. Okay.
Just realized, yeah, I'll have eggs now that you mentioned it. I always have eggs for breakfast.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. You get your own billboard on the side of a highway. It's a blank canvas. You can put anything you want on it. What would it say?
Man, blank canvas billboard, like picture or words?
Anything. You decide.
Anything.
Hashtag life strategy, something.
Oh, shoot. I would say keep your eyes up and keep moving forward.
Okay. If I say the word successful to you, who's the first person that pops into your head and why?
Probably my dad, just because he's been my constant role model of just, again, that solid work ethic. I think he's 100% where I got my work ethic today. And just knowing he's the definition of the American dream story of starting somewhere and making yourself or giving yourself the ability with the right mindset and the good work ethic to get anywhere. So He's definitely made twice the life for me and my brother and my mom than I think he had when he was growing up. And I want to be half the person I think I am today without him. So
very cool. Very cool. What's a typical day in your life look like?
Typical day in my life. So if it's a weekday, Monday through Friday and some weekends, I get up about 5:30, 6 a.m. My wife's a nurse, so if she's on shift, I'm helping her get ready for the day, cooking her breakfast, helping her get her lunch ready, that kind of thing, and getting her off to work. And then once that starts, if I feel like it, I go to the gym and then get back here. I try to start my day usually about 8:30 for work. So I get on the computer, answer a few emails. We do a lot of stuff with conservation organizations, so I have a lot of phone calls during the day. I think I'm on the phone more during the day probably than a lot of secretaries or even maybe some call center people. So a lot of talking, as you can probably tell through this podcast. I'm a talker. And then about 5:30 or so, I try to wrap up. I'm the cook of the house, so I really like to cook. So I usually start dinner then, and the wife gets home, we eat dinner, and try to go do something usually, either go walk the dogs or go have fun doing something and then call it a night. But
very cool. All right. And then finally, what's a deer hunting day in your life look like?
Deer hunting day in my life. So, well, in Iowa, it would be getting up at probably 4 a.m, making sure I always lay the stuff out the night before. So that accounts as the day, I suppose. So I try to lay my stuff out the night before, get up about 4 a.m. I've got a checklist on my phone of everything that I'm supposed to be bringing with me. I check that list off as I pack it. Get out there. I always spray down when I get to the field. I spray the car down before I get in, and then I spray myself down again when I get out. Go out there and just see whatever the morning brings. If it's dead, a lot of times I'll leave the stand probably about 11, try to come back 1:30, 2 o'clock. So I kind of get that evening hunt. When I moved to Virginia, the day was a little bit different. I figured that just the spots I had available to me, really, if it didn't happen by 7 a.m., it wasn't going to happen. So I stuck to night hunting more often than not. So usually I just go right after I got off work. I'd bring my stuff in my truck or the trunk of my car and spray it down, go sit in the blind, go climb a tree with my climber or whatever for a few hours in the evening. And that was actually the best hunting that I had out there. And now that we're in Montana, I think it's going to be a lot of early mornings, a lot of long hikes, and a lot of just glassing and seeing what the country has to offer.
Very cool. Excellent, man. All right. Those are the 10 rapid fire questions, Aaron.
Cool, man.
Excellent. So if we've created more questions for the listeners as they've been listening to our conversation about Tactacam and all the features and bells and whistles that it has, where can people reach out to get more information?
So Tactacam.com is going to be probably their number one resource. If you're looking for like videos or testimonials, that kind of thing, any of the video channels that are out there, YouTube, Vimeo, we've got all kinds of other ones out there. Facebook's a great place to find videos. You'll find more videos that'll sell you on it than anything. And you can actually see real life customer, videos of the stuff, how the Tactacam works, how it operates, what the footage actually looks like. So I think videos are going to be your number one resource. If you need product information, Tactacam.com. Anybody at Tactacam, if you know somebody, or we've got a Tactacam team of about 1,500 people that are all around the country that are a great resource for information as well. If you happen to know one of them, they're all over social media answering questions and stuff like that all the time. Our local dealers as well. We do a good job of training our local dealers about our products. So if you happen to know your local, big box stores, Shields, Cabela's, Bass Pro, those guys, they're all going to have them in there. They're pretty knowledgeable about our products, or the mom and pop shops. There's a good chance one of your local shops close to you's got a Tactacam, and they've been trained on the knowledge as well. So it's, with what we have for our camera, product knowledge is key, and we try to put it out everywhere we can. So Tactacam.com, any of the video channels that are out there, or your local dealer at the grassroots level is going to be your best resource.
Very cool. Excellent. Aaron, this has been an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show. I've really enjoyed talking to you about the product and your life and your involvement with Tactacam and how you got started, how they got started, and the deer story was tremendous. It's tremendous.
That's awesome. I'm glad I got to share it publicly. So that's pretty cool.
So thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's been a blast.
Welcome back anytime.
All right. Thank you, sir.
I appreciate Aaron taking some time to go through all the ins and outs of the Tactacam camera and the company and how it got to where it is today. Clearly, they started out with just a prototype and some duct tape and put it all together. And today, they have a company that hunters look up to and pursue that action camera probably more than any others. So we thought we'd dive in to see where the company's been, where they want to go, and what products are out there, because I'm sure there are a lot of you that always wanted one of these things, but just haven't actually bitten this off yet. So hopefully you found that helpful. Next week, we're going to go back to looking at an app. And this time we're going to be looking at Deer Lab, which is a little bit more than an app. It explores your pictures that you've taken on your game camera and then organizes them in a way that data can be produced on deer movement, which is really kind of what we're all trying to figure out. So stay tuned for that. Again, we're going to be talking to Deer Lab with John Livingston. Dusty, do we have a Chubby Tines tip of the week this week?
I do have a Chubby Tines tip of the week.
The Chubby Tines tip of the week is sponsored by Morse's Sporting Goods. Firearms, used firearms, bows, used bows, located at 85 Kentucky Falls Road in Hillsborough, New Hampshire. Give Jim a call at 603-464-3444, morsessportinggoods.com. Your dollars go further in New Hampshire. There's no sales tax. Morse's Sporting Goods.
Chubby Tines tip of the week is going to talk a little bit about the pre-rut that's getting ready to come in to play in the whitetail woods here in the next few weeks. We get into, I always say, like around October 25th through the Halloween, that you're going to see a little pre-rut activity. And what we see here in Ohio is that these bucks are going to start gorging on food. And, a food source is going to be a huge focal point for myself and a lot of other hunters that have been out there and witnessed the pre-rut activities. They're going to start really trying to pack on as many pounds as they can before this rut kicks off. Because we all know once the rut hits, it's nonstop on the run for, a solid month. And they try to really pack on as much nutrition as they can because they're going to deplete all their resources as far as nutritional as they start in the rut and chasing does. And it takes a really, really hard toll on their body once the rut kicks in. But also, you got to remember with the rut kicking off that these bucks are going to run the does. And it seems like daybreak, it starts out in the woods, and then they lead out to some kind of either a CRP or a cut cornfield, somewhere that they can keep a good visual on the doe. They can keep a good visual out for predators or hunters. So they go to them. A lot of times they go to them open fields, and that's going to be a huge focal point for myself to get to the fields and hunt the skirtings of cut cornfields or thicket, where the deer are going to naturally push out so that they can keep an eye on their does and they can keep the predators and the hunters in a visual sighting of anything that could bother them. They're going to want to get out in them fields, and it gives them more room to run, chase the doe, wear her down, get her where she's kind of wore out, where they can put the fancy on her. So I started focusing on tree stand placements along my field edges, and if you got everything set up just right, I tell you, the rut can be really fun, but it's so unpredictable once the rut kicks in and what the deer movement's going to be. And you're going to see a lot of chasing, a lot of buck activity, cruising around, trying to find a scent trail, maybe on a hot doe. But with any luck, you'd be out there in the woods and old Mr. Big Boy run right under you.
Dusty, where can we find you when you're not hanging out here in the studios with me?
Shoot me an email, Dusty at BigBuckRegistry.com. You can look me up on Instagram and Twitter at Chasing Antler, Facebook.com/Chubby Tines Outdoors. Jay, where can the people reach out to you when you're not on the mic?
Likewise, you can shoot me an email, jay@bigbuckregistry.com, and you can visit us on Facebook, facebook.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Twitter, which is twitter.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Instagram, instagram.com/bigbuckregistry, and YouTube, which is youtube.com/bigbuckregistry. On YouTube, you can listen to all of our podcasts in their entirety. As far as videos are concerned, it's a boring video, but the audio content is there, so you can actually listen to our podcast. You can also listen to all of our live shows that we've done on Thursday nights when we do them, and we've gone back and re-interviewed a lot of our previous guests we had on the show just to put a face to a voice, let's put it that way. You can always listen to our show on other places as well, not just YouTube. We're found on Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, and as an Amazon Alexa skill. Go to Alexa and say, Alexa, enable Big Buck Registry. And if you would like to submit a buck to our page for consideration and be featured on our page in front of 250,000 diehard deer hunting fans, all you have to do is go to bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck, and all of the instructions will be right there. I think that's pretty much everywhere we're at. I think that's a wrap, Dusty.
That's a whole lot of big buck, Jay.
Sure is. I'm Jay Scott.
I'm Dusty Phillips.
And this is the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. We'll see you next week.